The real assessment began after the spirit root test. Based on the inverted order, which people completed the path to heaven, Yi Qingtang would be the last person to go. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment led everyone to a place outside the courtyard. The courtyard was peculiar, as it was built on top of cloud layers. Multiple 8 trigrams flags served as walls that surrounded the courtyard. The flags were 4 meters in height and stuck closely together. The view inside was totally covered up. The middle-aged man placed his hands back and stared at the candidates. All candidates then stopped chatting and remained silent. This is an illusion array. All candidates are required to enter the array one by one. Illusion array? Various discussions arose among the candidates after the middle-aged man's words. No one knew what this illusion array was, but they were all clear that as a sect assessment, it would not be easy to pass. Senior, do we need to break the array in order to pass the assessment? One of the candidates asked, and that was what the rest were curious of. The middle-aged man shook his head. It would be best if you can break the array. If you can't, we shall see the situation in the array. Do not need to break the array? Everyone became even more curious about the illusion array in front of them. The middle-aged man asked a disciple behind him to distribute wax balls to candidates. There will be combat inside the array. Nothing inside will threaten your life. If you cannot take it anymore, just crush the wax ball, and the illusion array will disperse. You can then leave the array. However, I have to warn you now. The moment you crush the wax ball, the assessment comes to an end. The timing you crush the wax ball, and the length of time you can stay in the array, will be taken into consideration for the assessment. He said, combat. The key information in the middle-aged man's words was clearly captured by the candidates. Though he mentioned combat, their life would not be threatened. Furthermore, it was mentioned earlier that they did not need to break the array. It seemed like this assessment was just to test how long they could last in the array. Everyone was not that nervous after figuring out the rules. Even if they could not break the array, they just needed to spend more time in the array. It would not be very difficult. Based on the inverted order which people completed the path to heaven, a young man would be the first person to enter the illusion array. The young man was around 18 to 19 years old. He was tall and possessed an orange spirit root. He did not perform very well on the path to heaven, so he was well prepared now to earn some attention in the array. Are you ready to enter the array? The middle-aged man looked at the excited young man and asked in a deep voice. The young man nodded without any hesitation. The middle-aged man raised his hand, and a path emerged from the closely arranged 8 trigrams flags. The path was covered entirely by fog, and no one could see the view inside clearly. Enter. A command was given. The young man then walked towards the illusion array. His giant body disappeared from view after he stepped into the fog. The 8 trigrams flags assembled back and enclosed the entire array. I think that young man will be inside for quite a while. The longer you stay inside, the better it is. Even if you can't break the array, you can also drag out time inside. One of the candidates murmured, that's true. It'll take at least 2 to 3 days to assess the hundreds of us. Yi Qingtang stood at a corner and scanned through the rest of the candidates. She smiled slightly when she noticed how the rest felt relieved towards the illusion array. When was it ever easy to pass a sect assessment? Just when everyone thought that they would have to wait for at least half a day, a formidable roar came out of the illusion array all of a sudden. The roar seemed to make the cloud layers below them to tremble. Ah! A horrifying scream was heard along the roar of the beast. The piercing scream seemed to be able to tear people apart. The two sounds hit everyone like a flash of lightning. Previously relaxed people were now all covered with goosebumps. What was that? What is in the illusion array? The roaring sound of the beast greeted their ears constantly. It totally destroyed the calmness among everyone. Such a deep roar had to be made from an extraordinary demonic beast. Was there a powerful demonic beast holding down the illusion array? Suddenly, everyone's good moods disappeared. A stream of blue fog slowly drifted out of the illusion array the next second. A path emerged from the 8 trigrams flags instantly, and a man fled out in panic from the array. The young man who just entered the array a few moments ago was now pale and sweating heavily. The calmness he had before entering the array was long gone, and only a few scratch marks were left on his face now. No one knew what he had just encountered in the array. However, his reaction just now really shocked everyone who was present. Though this young man possessed an orange spirit root, he should not be so weak. He only stayed in the array for a few moments before coming out. Next, the middle-aged man took a quick glance at the young man and commanded. The second candidate shivered. He was totally taken aback by the previous candidate's reaction. However, he had no choice but to step into the array. Everyone was having some deep thoughts after the second candidate entered the array. They looked towards the first candidate subconsciously. The young man was still panicking and upset. Everyone knew what the situation was now, and no one asked him what he encountered in the array. The rules of the sect assessment did not allow candidates to reveal such information. Furthermore, as a result of the competition happening between the candidates, the candidate would not give them any answer even if they asked. This time, the candidate who entered the array did not escape immediately. However, the roaring sound of the beast rose one after another. Soon, a streak of blue fog was seen, and this represented the end of the second candidate's assessment. Even though he lasted slightly longer than the first candidate, the duration was still alarmingly short. Based on this speed, they would need only less than half a day to assess the hundreds of candidates here. The next few candidates who entered the array, all did not last very long. All of them came out with pale faces, as if they had seen something terrifying. The candidates who were still waiting were close to breaking down. They thought that as long as they lasted long enough in the array, they could pass the assessment. Who knew that things were much more complicated than what they imagined? More than half of the candidates had finished the assessment in less than half a day. Lu Xiaowen would be the next one now. He took a deep breath and stood in front of the array. He squinted his eyes as the array slowly opened up a path. Eventually he walked in. Among the clouds and fog, Lu Xiaowen did not have a clear view in front of him. He took a few steps forward, and the fog suddenly dispersed. He saw himself standing in a forest, and a pair of red eyes were staring at him through the gaps of the branches. At the next second, a giant beast walked out of the forest. It was a level 5 demonic beast with a height of 5 meters. Its body was full black in color, and its tusks were shimmering under the light. Its deathly red eyes stared at Lu Xiaowen, the only living creature in front of the beast. Lu Xiaowen panicked when he saw the demonic beast. A level 5 demonic beast was not something that the candidates could handle, as they had not gone through any training. What's wrong? How can a sect assessment be so difficult? Lu Xiaowen frowned. He did not even wish to beat the beast. He would celebrate in joy if he could escape from it. When Lu Xiaowen was contemplating, the beast roared in rage. Its giant body flew towards him. Lu Xiaowen held the wax ball tighter, but then he remembered what the middle-aged man told them. Nothing inside would threaten your life. A thought came through his mind, and he gave up the opportunity of crushing the wax ball. He immediately pulled out the sword by his waist and blocked the beast's attack. He could feel a heavy weight from the sword, but such strength was totally incomparable with that from a real level 5 demonic beast. Lu Xiaowen's eyes sparkled, and he dashed forward with his sword. As time passed, Lu Xiaowen spent a much longer time in the array than all previous candidates. The middle-aged man's face softened. Though there were some candidates who lasted inside for quite a while, Lu Xiaowen was in a much better state compared to them. A streak of blue fog emerged after a long time. Lu Xiaowen appeared outside the array the next second. His face was not pale, but still not very pleasant. Though he found out the trick of the array, he could not find a way to break it. He could only crush the wax ball before he ran out of energy. However, Lu Xiaowen took a breath and looked towards Yin Shu. He believed that the duration he spent inside the array was much longer than all previous candidates. Now there were only Yi Qingtang and Yin Shu left. Lu Xiaowen did not bother with Yi Qingtang, who only possessed a red spirit root. Only Yin Shu could compete with him at this assessment. Lu Xiaowen, you can now go to the next assessment location. The middle-aged man spoke to him slowly. He was quite satisfied with Lu Xiaowen's performance. Lu Xiaowen spent quite a long time in the array, So all previous candidates had already moved on to the next assessment location. Lu Xiaowen nodded slightly. His arrogant sight swept past Yin Shu and landed on Yi Qingtang. He smiled and left. Next, the middle-aged man said. Yin Shu took a glance at Yi Qingtang. He nodded and walked into the array. Outside the array, Yi Qingtang was the only person left. A faintly discernible smile emerged on her face. She clearly witnessed the sight from Lu Xiaowen before he left. Lu Xiaowen was quite talented since he could last so long in the array. However, so what? Yi Qingtang chuckled. She waited patiently for her turn to enter the array. Yin Shu spent a long time inside. He could only crush the wax ball to leave the array. When he stepped out of the array, he looked towards Yi Qingtang's direction instinctively. He was about to remind her about something when the middle-aged man stopped his words. Yin Shu, you can now move on to the next assessment location. Yes. Yin Shu wanted to tell Yi Qingtang about the illusion array. However, he did not have any chance to do so, and had to leave for the next assessment. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Qingtang with a complicated expression. Yi Qingtang, are you ready to enter now? Yi Qingtang took a step forward and nodded. The illusion array was turned on. Within the sect, the 4 sect elders were staring at the image from the water-moon mirror. All of them did not pay much attention as Yi Qingtang walked inside the array. Yin Shu and Lu Xiaowen did quite well in the array. They could figure out the trick within such a short period of time. Elder Lin was quite satisfied with both of their performances. Su Wan and Mo were not too bad as well. I saw that they lasted inside for quite a long time. Though it's not comparable with Yin Shu and Lu Xiaowen, they are still up to the standard. The elder of the Fist faction also noticed some potential candidates. Illusion array is now ended then. Elder Lin spoke softly and ignored Yi Qingtang, who just entered the array. Elder Qin frowned. Elder Lin sneered at Elder Qin's reaction. Elder Qin, are you still thinking of that Yi Qingtang? She has only a red spirit root. The disciples previously could not last very long in the array. I'm afraid she will also. The moment when Elder Lin spoke, the 4 elders were shocked by the scene from the water-moon mirror. Yi Qingtang witnessed the illusions appearing in front of her, but she was unusually calm. She stared calmly at the level 5 demonic beast, and did not step back at all. Suddenly, she pulled out her sword and pushed herself above the ground, dashing towards the beast. The sharp point of the blade pierced through the heart of the demonic beast. Without any extra moves, the demonic beast collapsed as its heart was pierced through. Its giant body turned into a ball of black fume, and disappeared in front of her. The 4 elders were astonished at the moment. All demonic creatures inside the array were made from illusions. Though they possessed the appearances of level 5 demonic beasts, their actual strength was less than 10% of the actual ones. They were almost like normal beasts. However, all candidates were not aware of this, and no one revealed about that as well. The fierce look of the level 5 demonic beast was enough to frighten the young men. Some of the previous candidates noticed the weakened beast. However, under the constant attack of the beast, its giant body and cruel appearance, all these created huge pressure on the candidates. It was not easy to suppress the pressure, but for Yi Qingtang, she did not even blink before she killed the demonic beast, made from illusion, with one single move. This was really beyond the 4 elders' imaginations. After Yi Qingtang killed one beast, she noticed another 2 beasts made from the illusion. Her mouth tilted. The demonic beast would appear constantly inside the illusion array. Only breaking the array could end this totally. Even if one could kill 1,000 of them, they would be trapped here forever. This time, Yi Qingtang did not attack the 2 beasts. Instead, she turned and rushed towards the opposite direction in the forest. That's it. In the end, she still cannot control her fear. Elder Lin was no longer shocked. He left a comment as he saw Yi Qingtang escaping from the beasts. However, at the moment when Elder Lin left the comment, all elders were totally stunned by Yi Qingtang's next move. Yi Qingtang's tiny figure dashed across the forest. The trees behind her served as a natural barrier from the 2 demonic beasts. Her sight was sharp, and she scanned through the trees that looked totally alike to each other. Suddenly, her feet tapped softly and flew towards an insignificant tree. She raised her sword and struck towards the top of the tree. A branch was chopped down. The branch fell onto the ground and turned into a streak of fumes. The fumes then disappeared. The two beasts that were roaring and chasing behind her suddenly became two balls of black fumes, and then dispersed. Yi Qingtang landed in confidence and stared at the forest that was slowly disappearing in front of her. A tinge of a smile was seen on her face. Everything in the illusion array was all made from illusions. The only way to break the array was to find out the array center. Breaking the center could then break the array. In her previous life, Yi Qingtang was trapped inside for a long time. She was not willing to give up and struggled with all her strength. She only crushed the wax ball when she used up all her energy. However, in this life, Yi Qingtang lowered her head and stared at the complete wax ball, and a deep smile appeared in her eyes. The illusion array was very difficult for normal candidates. The center of the array was hidden inside the trees that looked exactly the same. Normal people would not be able to distinguish it. However, she had lost count the number of times she entered the illusion arrays when she was in the Xianling sect in her previous life. She could remember everything in the array clearly. The entire forest was now dispersing as layers of fumes. Yi Qingtang witnessed the path that she came from was opened up again. She walked towards the exit slowly. The middle-aged man who guarded outside the array stared at the young lady in shock. The little figure was so eye-catching in the fog. She broke the array. The middle-aged man was totally stunned. The illusion array was the first sect assessment. Only 3 to 5 people managed to do so in the past thousands of years. Those few were extremely talented and were born in array family clans. That was the reason why they could break the array. Those few people spent at least half a day to break the array, and some even spent 1 or 2 days. How much time had passed since Yi Qingtang entered? This amount of time was not even enough for her to see through the views in the array. How could she break the array? The middle-aged man could not figure out an answer, and he remained in surprise. I have broken the array. Can I go to the next assessment location now? Yi Qingtang walked out calmly and looked towards the stunned middle-aged man. Fear came from inside. When one conquered fear, all beasts from the illusion would disappear. The middle-aged man pulled himself out of surprise. He adjusted his emotions and said, "You can now proceed to the next assessment location." Yi Qingtang nodded and left. The middle-aged man stared at her back, and multiple thoughts arose in his head. He found the way Yi Qingtang broke the array peculiar, and instinctively he contacted the elders who witnessed the entire assessment process through the psychic tablet. Only the elders would know what exactly happened in the array. Elders Yi Qingtang just now. The middle-aged man spoke to the psychic tablet. Before he could finish his words, Elder Qin's voice was heard from the psychic tablet. Yi Qingtang broke the array by herself. There was no abnormality to the array. The middle-aged man was stunned and did not question further. However, within the sect, after speaking to the middle-aged man, Elder Qin looked towards Elder Lin, whose face was unpleasant. Chapter 108. Elder Lin, I'm afraid that you are wrong this time. Elder Qin sneered. Elder Lin's face was very unpleasant now. If he had not witnessed the scene with his own eyes, he would never believe that a 15-year-old young lady would be able to break the illusion array once she entered. The center of the illusion array changed each time it was turned on. Only disciples of the Xianling sect would know about the center. Yi Qingtang was just a candidate, and she was not even born into an array family. How could she break the array within such a short time? Elder Lin remembered how he looked down at Yi Qingtang previously and felt slightly embarrassed. It's pure luck. It won't be so easy for the next few assessments. Elder Lin took a deep breath and tried to hide his surprise towards Yi Qingtang. Elder Qin took a glimpse at Elder Lin and decided not to reply to him anymore. He was delighted, but he sighed at the same time. He was the elder of the array faction, and he definitely preferred disciples who were talented in array formation. He was satisfied with her from the beginning. Her shocking performance during the illusion array made him applaud and awe as well. She was really a rare and talented person. However, Elder Qin sighed secretly. He would really want to nurture Yi Qingtang if her spirit root was of a higher quality. Such a pity. No one would know what the four elders were thinking about. Yi Qingtang also headed towards the second assessment location. After breaking the array, Yi Qingtang arrived at the place soon, as the two locations were not far from each other. Yun Shu was waiting for the second assessment to begin when he saw Yi Qingtang coming over. He was a little surprised. Lu Xiuwen, who was standing nearby, saw Yi Qingtang as well, but his eyes were full of sarcasm. Yi Qingtang came over slightly after Yun Shu reached the second assessment location. She definitely only spent a little while in the array. Lu Xiuwen was confident that Yi Qingtang was like the rest of the candidates who were horrified by the monsters in the array. Lu Xiuwen only glanced at her once and decided not to pay attention to her anymore. A red spirit root was too inferior for a candidate. She definitely did not stand a chance to enter the sect since she flunked the first assessment. Lady Yi. Yun Shu greeted her politely. Yi Qingtang took a glimpse at senior brother Yin. He wanted to say something but hesitated. She was amused by his reaction. She was the last candidate for the previous assessment. Only she would know the result of the assessment. It seemed like senior brother Yin thought she escaped from the array in fear, and that was why he showed such a complex expression. Senior brother Yin, I will not be the useless junior sister again anymore. Has the second assessment started? Yi Qingtang smiled and asked. She did not explain much since if she could enter the sect by the end of the assessments, Yun Shu would know her performances in each assessment. It's going to start soon. The second assessment is also testing on array formation, but it's a sword array. Yun Shu said. Sword array? Yi Qingtang lifted her eyebrows and glanced through the stone table that was around 100 miles away. The stone table was engraved with the 8 trigrams, and a sword was placed in the stone, at the center of the 8 trigrams. Senior brother Yin, this is not an array formation. Yi Qingtang smiled. Not an array formation? Yin Shu was confused. Chapter 109. Yi Qingtang used a voice that could only be heard by the two of them and said, Array formation has a center to break, but the sword array does not. This means that it cannot be broken. The sword in the stone is not the center? Yin Shu was not familiar with array formations. That's not true. Yi Qingtang shook her head and smiled. The middle-aged man arrived at the location when Yi Qingtang was chatting with Yin Shu. The sword array will test how long you can last inside. The middle-aged man opened his mouth expressionlessly. It was another simple introduction without any clues given. All candidates were confused by the rules. They were totally lost after the unpredictable illusion array just now. They could not figure out the assessment ways at all. Testing on duration again. This time would there be any demonic beasts? The standard this time is determined by your situation in the sword array. You can't give up by yourself anymore. If you're hurt by the array, your assessment will end. The middle-aged man walked to the side and added, hurt by the array. The candidates caught the key information. However, when they glanced at the empty 8 trigram stage, they still could not figure out the nature of the assessment. The first candidate felt extremely hopeless, as this round of assessment was conducted in front of everyone. People behind might still be able to refer to the previous candidates, but he was the first one again. First candidate, up the stage now. The middle-aged man did not leave any thinking time for the candidates. He immediately announced the beginning of the assessment. The first candidate came to the front in despair. However, this time the middle-aged man provided him with a reminder. You can use weapons to assist you in the sword array. The candidate immediately held the sword by his waist and stood on the 8 trigram stage desperately. The middle-aged man then walked to the side of the stage and turned on the sword array. Rays of light suddenly came out of the sword in the stone. The white light covered the entire sword. Suddenly, the stationary sword started to vibrate, and multiple sword shadows emerged out of the sword. The shadows formed 5 lightsabers, dashing towards the air. They turned sharply in the mid-air and attacked the candidate on the 8 trigram stage. The 5 lightsabers shot towards the candidate from all directions. The candidate shivered and then lifted his sword to defend himself. A loud clang rang. The candidates flourished his sword continuously to fend off the attack of the lightsabers. His feet also shifted swiftly for defense. The moment he was hurt by the lightsabers, the assessment would then end. This assessment appeared to be easier than the previous one, and he definitely would put in all his effort to compensate his poor performance previously. The candidate successfully fended off the first attack, as the speed of the lightsabers were not too fast. The sword array doesn't seem to be very difficult. The rest of the candidates who were watching the assessment were much more relieved. This was much easier than the illusion array. Yi Qingtang noticed how the rest sighed in relief, and her mouth tilted. Not very difficult. You will soon know how difficult it can be. When everyone was calmer than before, the sword in the stone vibrated again. Another 5 lightsabers flew out all of a sudden. The lightsabers on the stage increased to 10 now, and the speed doubled. The candidate who just sighed in relief was shocked by the 10 lightsabers. Before he could react, the swords dashed towards him with double the speed. Chapter 110. Shadows of the sword shimmered on the 8 trigram stage. The 10 lightsabers flew in the air. Their speed increased so fast that they did not leave any reaction time for the candidate. The candidate's shoulder was cut by one of the light swords before he could adjust his position. The middle-aged man switched off the sword array immediately. The lightsabers on the 8 trigram stage then disappeared, leaving the shocked candidate on the stage alone. The wound on his shoulder was clearly visible. The whole process happened within a split second, which was even shorter than the time he spent in the illusion array. Next, the middle-aged man said. The candidates no longer felt relieved anymore. Previously, they were nervous about the illusion array, as they could not see the situation inside. However, though the views inside were terrifying, some who were brave were still able to fight against the demonic beasts. Even if they could not do so, they could still run around in the array to earn some time. But now, there seemed to be a heavy stone pressing down on everyone's hearts. There was totally no time to rest in the sword array. Though the 8 trigram stage's size was at least 100 square meters, where could they run to under the attack of so many lightsabers together? What was more desperate was that even if they could fend off one attack, the number doubled in the next round. The time in between only allowed them to take one breath at most. No one felt relieved anymore. The second candidate had no choice but to step onto the stage. Everyone had a heavy heart now, trying to adjust their state of mind. Lu Xiaowen was calm when he witnessed how the rest reacted. He was quite talented as he went through cultivation with his master at a very young age. He was definitely more skilled than the rest, and he had more confidence towards the sword array. However, Lu Xiaowen's calmness faded slowly as more candidates went through the sword array. The first round was 5 lightsabers, the second was 10, and the third increased to 20. The number doubled each time. Previous candidates only managed to last until the start of the third round at most. If based on this calculation, it would be 40 the next round. How were the candidates supposed to defend that? People were dazzled by the flying lightsabers on the stage. It was difficult to have a clear vision of the positions of the lightsabers. How could they dodge the attacks? This was like fighting against 10 people with one person's strength. The sword array took less time than the illusion array. Candidates who finished the assessment left straight away. Soon it was Lu Xiaowen's turn. Lu Xiaowen's ability allowed him to push through the third attack with all his strength. Eventually, he was cut by one of the lightsabers during the fourth attack, and his assessment ended. However, he was the best candidate among the rest for now. Yun Shu was the next one after Lu Xiaowen. Yun Shu's results were almost the same as Lu Xiaowen. He struggled for a while more, but eventually, he also stopped at the fourth round. Now, Yi Qingtang was the only person left. I'll wait for you at the third assessment location. Be careful. Yun Shu reminded Yi Qingtang and left. The middle-aged man looked towards Yi Qingtang worriedly. If the illusion array was testing on one's wisdom and bravery, the sword array would be testing one's true fighting skills. Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu both possessed green spirit roots. It was normal for them to be better than the rest. However, Yi Qingtang, ultimately, she only had the worst red spirit root. Chapter 111. Yi Qingtang, Are you ready to enter the sword array? The middle-aged man did not limit his words this time. Yi Qingtang nodded slightly. She held her sword and walked towards the 8 trigram stage in silence. The 4 elders stared at Yi Qingtang and the sect. Their expressions were delicate. The elders of the Fist faction and Herbal faction did not have many feelings for the young lady, who had an excellent performance in the illusion array. Elder Qin of the Array faction had some interest in Yi Qingtang. Elder Qin, what do you think about her results this time? Elder Lin suddenly asked. Elder Qin took a glimpse at Elder Lin and said, The sword array is set by your sword faction. You should be clearer than me. Elder Lin sneered, and then looked towards the mirror. The sword array tests the fighting skills of a candidate. I have never seen anyone with a red spirit root step onto the 8 trigram stage. I can't predict her performance this time. Though Elder Lin did not make it obvious, everyone could sense his sarcasm. Elder Qin frowned. He did not like the tone that Elder Lin used, but he had to admit that what he said was true. The sword array was different from the illusion array. A person without some practical fighting skills could not last long even if they mastered array formations. Yi Qingtang's spirit root. Elder Qin sighed. Yi Qingtang stood still on the 8 trigram stage. The middle-aged man turned on the sword array as he saw Yi Qingtang was prepared. The sword in the stone was surrounded by light the next second. It vibrated slightly, and lightsabers were split out of the stone. When Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and was ready to fight the lightsabers, the light on the sword in the stone suddenly changed. The white light was replaced by a blood-red color. A loud and piercing sound was made by the sword in the stone the next moment. It vibrated violently, and countless light shadows were seen. The middle-aged man's face turned as he witnessed the changes of the sword in the stone. What happened? Why was there a sudden change to the sword in the stone? An ominous feeling crept within him. Only white light should be radiated when the sword array was turned on. How could the light suddenly turn red? The middle-aged man sensed something was not right. He then wanted to turn off the sword array temporarily, but his hand was rebounded off by a strong force from the button. The piercing sound cut through the sky again. Within a second, the sword in the stone that was surrounded by the right light suddenly released innumerable red lightsabers. The blood-red lightsabers flew into the sky like red rain, covering the whole sky. The entire 8 trigram stage was red, due to the reflection of the light. Yi Qingtang felt slightly uneasy as she stared at the bright light above her head in surprise. She went through the sword array in her previous lives assessment. However, she was cut by the lightsabers at the beginning of the second round in her previous life. Yi Qingtang spent a long time in the Xianling sect in her previous life, but she had never heard that the sword in the stone would radiate red light. She could not even imagine the first round of the sword array would have more than 100 of lightsabers. Even Yi Qingtang, who was reborn, was also shocked by the variation of the sword array. However, before she could figure out what exactly happened, the hundreds of lightsabers above her head dashed towards the 8 trigram stage suddenly like raindrops. Chapter 112. This is bad. Within the sect, the 4 faction elders, who were watching the sword array assessment, suddenly stood up upon seeing the blinding red light. Expressions of shock were etched on their faces. What's going on? Why is there a sudden change to the sword array? Elder Qin's expression was the ugliest. A sky full of red light fell on the ground like raindrops with a speed so fast that one was unable to catch. Under an attack of such a level, a young girl would definitely be unable to block them, even if she was a born genius. Similarly, Elder Lin had a look of shock. The sword array was the first segment of Xianling sect's entrance assessment, and had been in use for hundreds of years without any errors. But then, such an abnormality happened before his eyes. For normal assessments, the sword array had been weakened a lot, and even if candidates were injured, they were merely minor abrasions. The sword array would definitely not take their lives. However, before their eyes, the lightsabers would only turn red when fighting against enemies. The sword array then was no longer the sword array that the candidates had experienced. This was the real absolute kill sword array. As long as one was attacked, one would definitely lose their life. For a moment, Elder Lin's face darkened as well. Even if he did not like how Elder Qin thought so highly of Yi Qingtang, he did not want the sword array to have any abnormality at this instant. The sword faction was responsible for preparing this sword array. Elder Lin, what exactly is going on? Elder Wen asked with furrowed brows. Elder Lin's expression was very ugly. Without explaining further to Elder Qin, he directly reached for the psychic tablet and ordered the middle-aged man beside the 8 trigram stage. Turn the sword array off immediately. If they were any later, Yi Qingtang might lose her life on the 8 trigram stage. Upon receiving the news, the middle-aged man beside the 8 trigram stage was very anxious. He tried to shut the sword array down again, but was repelled away by the force once again. Elder Lin, this sword array cannot be turned off, the middle-aged man said hurriedly. Elder Lin's face darkened further. The sword array cannot be turned off? How could it be? Just when everyone was surprised over the sudden change in the sword array, Yi Qingtang, who was standing on the 8 trigram stage, faced her first crisis since her rebirth. Lightsabers pierced down one after another at a speed as fast as lightning. Yi Qingtang sensed a strong overbearing force flowing out continuously from the sword in the stone. She could not care about any other thing, and could only lift her sword in the shortest time possible. With a quick flick of her wrist, she made a series of strokes, and drew a circle with her sword. Spinning around quickly, it was as though that flash of sword became a silver shield, reflecting away all the lightsabers that were flying down towards her. Suddenly a loud clang rang. The descending lightsabers clashed against those that were hid away, turning the sky above the 8 trigram stage into a sea of red. The clashing sound was as loud as the sound of the explosion of a massive rock. Yi Qingtang backstepped quickly with clever footsteps, which were rapid yet orderly, fast and steady. Accompanying with the dancing sword in her hands, she actually blocked the shower of lightsabers. All of this fell into the eyes of the 4 faction elders. Originally shocked over the sudden change in the sword array, they were completely stunned after witnessing Yi Qingtang's actions. This girl actually blocked them? Elder Qin's eyes widened suddenly, completely in disbelief over what he saw. The absolute kill sword array could defeat millions of enemies. How could it be blocked by a candidate who has not even entered the sect? Chapter 113. Even Elder Lin's eyes were full of shock. As an elder from the sword faction, no one other than him knew more clearly of the force of the sword array. Although the sword array was only at the starting stage, it was already extremely fierce. He initially thought that Yi Qingtang would lose her life in the first wave of attacks. However, things were completely beyond his expectations. That is the 7 stars on Moon footstep? An elder from the Fist faction sharply noticed Yi Qingtang's rapidly moving footsteps. Her pair of legs were unusually nimble, and although its movements appeared messy, it actually followed a pattern. 7 stars on Moon footstep? Isn't that one of the must-learns from that person? Elder Qin asked in surprise. The Fist faction elder frowned slightly and took a closer look. It seems like it, but it's a little different. I saw fragments of the 7 stars on Moon footstep scroll by chance only once, and cannot verify it. Moreover, that lord had already disappeared for a long time. Since that big battle, it is unknown whether he is still alive or not. Now is not the time to consider these. The first wave of attack is ending soon. If the sword array still cannot be shut down, the second wave of attack in the absolute kill sword array will directly shoot out millions of lightsabers. Even the 8 trigram stage would be destroyed, much less Yi Qingtang. Elder Qin took a deep breath and turned to look at Elder Lin beside him. Elder Lin frowned deeply. Instantly, he turned around and headed outside. On the 8 trigram stage, Yi Qingtang's alertness was raised to the extreme, as her quickly turning wrists held on the sword to hit the flying lightsabers continuously. It was already numbed by the force of the impact. At this instant, Yi Qingtang really could not laugh at all. The sword array that she initially thought she could pass easily actually changed suddenly. This change shocked Yi Qingtang extremely, and she could only use the footstep that she used to save her life in her previous life. Yi Qingtang obtained this set of footsteps coincidentally in her previous life. Initially, she did not think that there was anything special about it, but after practicing and mastering it, she found out its secret. It could be said that this set of footsteps helped her escape in the many times she was surrounded by enemies in her previous life. She had no intention of using it in the assessment, but now, she had to use it even if she did not want to. As Yi Qingtang cautiously countered the attack of the lightsabers, her mind was constantly thinking about the sudden change in the sword array. In her previous life when she entered Xianling sect, she had entered the sword array as well. Nothing abnormal happened to it then, and she had never heard of any accidents in the sword array assessment in the previous years before. How? Did everything detract from history's track? Could it be? A shocking thought suddenly appeared in Yi Qingtang's mind. In her previous life, she had never used the power of the heart of the demon god. Thus, there was nothing to worry about. However, now the spirit root in her body was formed using the heart of the demon god. Even if Yi Qingtang could hide the heart of the demon god and not let anyone else discover it, the sword array only sensed one's aura and would not be misled by any other thing. Could it be that the sword array suddenly became this violent because it sensed the heart of the demon god in her body? At the thought, Yi Qingtang could not help but break out in a cold sweat. Despite all her calculations, she missed out on the sensory ability of the sword in the stone. It was really too careless. Yi Qingtang was quietly vexed over her carelessness, but her limbs did not dare to relax a little. If she was slightly careless and got stabbed by the lightsaber, she might be buried here. Chapter 114. Yi Qingtang was unaware of how many lightsabers she had hid away already. As the red light in the sky faded bit by bit, Yi Qingtang still could not be at ease. She did not forget that this was a sword array that would continue on for eternity, as long as it was not shut down. When she hit the last lightsaber away, she suddenly heard the middle-aged man's screams. Yi Qingtang, quickly take this time to leave the 8 trigram stage. The middle-aged man, who was still unable to shut down the sword array, reminded her immediately, without caring about anything else, when he saw Yi Qingtang single-handedly blocking the first wave of attack. Yi Qingtang did not say anything else, and found a good opportunity to flee from the 8 trigram stage. However, just as her toes reached the sides of the 8 trigram stage, a red light emerged from the sides of the 8 trigram stage. A strong air stream violently flowed through Yi Qingtang. The entire 8 trigram stage was enclosed by a circle of red light instantly. Yi Qingtang's heart was in her mouth immediately. The sword in the stone definitely had discovered the presence of the heart of the demon god. Otherwise, why would there be such a big move to trap her on the 8 trigram stage so persistently until she dies? The middle-aged man below the 8 trigram stage was taken aback as well. He had been in Xianling sect for many years and was in charge of the assessment many times, but he had never seen the sword array become like this. And at that instant, a piercing sound was sounded by the sword in the stone once again. This time, lightsabers numbering more than 10 times the lightsabers in the first wave suddenly flew up the sky, and in the encirclement of the red light, the surrounding was tainted by the scarlet light like fresh blood, resulting in a patch of crimson. Yi Qingtang looked up. Her black and white eyes reflected countless scarlet lightsabers, as though the color of blood filled her eyes. At that very instant, the little black ball within the heart of the demon god was utterly panicking. It could feel the danger that Yi Qingtang was going to face. It wanted to take over the little lightning dragon's body and block everything for Yi Qingtang, but realized that the little lightning dragon's body was still frail and could not withstand the little black ball's occupation, since the little black ball took over the little lightning dragon's body once on the journey here. Mother! Mother! The little black ball could only roar irritably within the heart of the demon god. Countless lightsabers hovered above the 8 trigram stage. Under the glimmer of the red light, the middle-aged man outside the 8 trigram stage was completely taken aback. This was it. This was really it. Even if Yi Qingtang had 3 heads and 6 limbs, she would still be unable to block this wave of the absolute kill sword array. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath, narrowing her eyes as she tightened her grip on the sword in her hand. She definitely could not die here. Just when the lightsabers were about to attack, A loud blast suddenly sounded from the sword in the stone. Along with the piercing blast, the sky of lightsabers instantly became an illusion, fading away as they flew down. Yi Qingtang watched the tip of a lightsaber, which was just under her nose, turn into a ball of red light and fall on the ground quietly. The red light that enveloped the 8 trigram stage completely vanished at that moment. Instantly, the entire 8 trigram stage returned to calmness, as though the life and death struggle a while ago ceased to exist. Yi Qingtang was slightly surprised but did not dare to rush into any action, and her hand which held the sword was on alert for a long time. Outside the 8 trigram stage, the middle-aged man who was covered in goosebumps suddenly felt a slight tremble in the psychic tablet. The sword array is turned off, let her come down. Elder Lin's slightly exhausted voice sounded from the psychic tablet. Chapter 115. The middle-aged man was shocked, but he understood the situation. Once the absolute kill sword array started, it could only be closed by a sword faction elder. However, Elder Lin might have used quite a lot of energy to shut down the absolute kill sword array so urgently. Yes, replied the middle-aged man as he looked up at Yi Qingtang on the 8 trigram stage. Yi Qingtang, the sword array is turned off already. You can come down. On the 8 trigram stage, Yi Qingtang's breathing was rather hurried. It had not been a month since her spirit root rebuilt, and her body still experienced the pain of having a spirit root dug out. Thus, she had not fully regained her strength. Under normal circumstances, she would have definitely died in the sword array. She was able to live until now only because of the experiences she accumulated in her previous life, when fleeing for her life. Yi Qingtang took a deep breath and calmed her erratic breathing, though her heart was already on alert. There were many magical objects on Earth, and who knew which of them would be able to sense the aura of the heart of the demon god. She really had to be even more careful in the future. Moreover, she did not know whether Xianling sect found any clues. The middle-aged man could not help but admire Yi Qingtang when he saw that she was not at all flustered, even though she seemed exhausted. If it were to be any other candidate, they most likely would have died in the sword array. It was indeed unusual for Yi Qingtang, however, to stay this calm and composed, and even be so indifferent after the incident. Senior, do I need to retake this sword array assessment? Yi Qingtang's first sentence upon coming down from the 8 trigram stage stunned the middle-aged man. Retake the assessment? The middle-aged man took a look at the messy 8 trigram stage and felt a shiver down his spine. There was a sudden change to the sword array, and God knows what abnormality actually happened. Under such circumstances, the sword faction would definitely not start up the sword array again within a short period of time. Nonetheless, it was good that Yi Qingtang was the last candidate. There is no need. You can just head straight to the location of the 3rd segment, the middle-aged man said. Yi Qingtang did not say anything further. She had used up too much energy just now, and her body did not have a strong foundation from the start. Using all her energy in a fight like this had physically exhausted her. Luckily, Yi Qingtang knew that the 3rd segment did not require too much energy. After a slight nod, Yi Qingtang left, and her anxious heart calmed down a little. If she could continue taking the assessment, it meant that Xianling sect did not discover the heart of the demon god. Now she could rest assured. When Yi Qingtang headed for the location of the 3rd segment, the 4 elders' hearts were heavy. Elder Lin, why did the absolute kill sword array start without a reason? Elder Qin looked towards a rather exhausted Elder Lin who was walking back slowly. It is still unknown as of now. I have ordered sword faction disciples to close the sword array down temporarily. I will investigate in detail after this assessment. Elder Lin's complexion was pale. Once the absolute kill sword array started, only he and Xianling sect's sect master could forcefully turn it off by using large amounts of energy. He urgently closed the absolute kill sword array just now, and thus his breathing was still erratic. I hope such incidences will not happen again. The sword array is not set up only for candidates. If we face external enemies, and the sword array experiences an abnormality, it would be unfavorable to the sect, Elder Qin said with a slight front. From his point of view, The sword array was administered by the sword faction, and it was definitely the sword faction's responsibility now that something happened to it. This time, Elder Lin did not talk back, and a deep frown sat on his face. He himself could not understand why the absolute kill sword array started up for no reason. Forget it. There is no accident in the end. Just pay more attention in the future, said the Fist faction elder, who stood up as a mediator. Chapter 116. That's right. The sword array assessment had already ended, and there should not be any more problems in the future. I believe Elder Lin will be more careful in the future, echoed the herbal faction elder. Elder Qin scoffed secretly. The sword faction was powerful, so naturally, the fist and herbal factions would be biased towards Elder Lin. Just because nothing happened doesn't mean that there isn't a problem. Previously, you all thought that Yi Qingtang's spirit root was too inferior. Yet who would have thought that she could actually withstand the absolute kill sword array? Honestly speaking, what do you think will happen if it happened to other candidates? Even if it was Lu Xiaowen from the formidable Heavens Royals, or Yin Shu from the Lu Yin family clan, they would most probably die should they encounter the absolute kill sword array. Wouldn't they? Elder Qin's words were rather sharp. As his voice sounded, Elder Lin's expression turned even uglier. The appearance of the absolute kill sword array was unexpected, but what made him more shocked was the fact that Yi Qingtang could actually bear its attacks. As seen, Yi Qingtang does have some abilities. She is obviously first for the sword array segment today, said the herbal faction elder thoughtfully with a hint of admiration towards Yi Qingtang in his tone. Lu Xiaowen and Yin Shu's results were already the best, but they went through only the weakened sword array. Moreover, they only withstood the attack of a few dozen lightsabers. However, Yi Qingtang, in the absolute kill sword array, she dealt with hundreds of lightsabers and retreated safely. Such a splendid record was indeed stunning. None of the outer sect disciples would have performed better than her, much less other candidates. Yi Qingtang, whom they had been pessimistic towards, brought them surprise after surprise. Not only was the herbal faction elder shocked over this, even the Fist faction elder could not help but pay more attention to her. There is a strong correlation between the fact that she could bear the absolute kill sword array and that set of footsteps. If those footsteps really originated from the 7 stars on Moon footstep, and she could retreat safely, it is also not impossible. Elder Lin took a deep breath, though he was still unwilling to approve of Yi Qingtang. As he said this, his eyes were obviously looking at Elder Qin, who had been strongly supporting Yi Qingtang all this while. Upon hearing Elder Qin's words, the 2 elders from the herbal and fist factions felt that it was logical. After all, the 7 stars on Moon footstep was that mighty figure's special skill, which allowed him to retreat safely even when surrounded by hordes of troops. Elder Qin scoffed. He knew that Elder Lin was using Yi Qingtang's incident to go against him, but he was also unwilling to argue with Elder Lin any further. The place of the 3rd segment was much simpler. A huge stone pillar stood on top of the clouds. It was 10 meters tall, and could only be encircled with the joint force of 4 grown men. Large lifelike dragons were carved on the stone pillar, making it appear very majestic. A black stone slate, with a dimension of 1 square meter, was hung on the stone pillar. Yi Qingtang rushed up to where other candidates stood, but her pale complexion attracted both Yin Shu and Lu Xiaowen's attention. "Miss Yi, are you all right?" Yin Shu stood forward and asked. Yi Qingtang shook her head slightly, but her lack of strength made her look frail. Not anyone can go up against the sword array. Looking at Yi Qingtang's miserable appearance and estimating the time, Lu Xiaowen knew that she withstood 1 wave of attack at most. Ultimately, a red spirit root is still a red spirit root. There was no way she could make any shocking achievements. Yi Qingtang glanced at Lu Xiaowen, and a sneer hung on the corner of her lips. There was still 1 more segment in the assessment, and she wanted to see how exciting Lu Xiaowen's expression would be when the final results were revealed. All candidates will come forward one by one, and hit the black stone slate hung on the stone pillar with their fists. The results of the assessment would be decided by the degree of damage done to the stone slate. Candidates, who had been afraid for a long time, heaved a heavy sigh of relief at the third segment of the assessment. After going through the unpredictable illusion array, as well as the dangerous sword array, the third segment unexpectedly looked very easy. At least, they did not need to be worried about being frightened anymore. The previous two segments had already drained the strength of all candidates. If they were to go through any intense assessments now, there would most likely be no prideful results. It was just hitting a stone slate, how hard could it be? The first candidate went up the array without any burden from before. Gathering all his strength, he let out a loud roar and heavily punched at the dark black stone slate. A loud boom was heard as all his strength was put in the punch on the stone slate. However, a shocking scene appeared. This hit with all his might only made a faint dent on that stone slate that was a finger thick. Chapter 118. The candidate who landed the punch was dumbfounded. As he looked at the faint and almost invisible dent, his face, which was full of confidence a moment ago, turned a little stiff. How could this be? The candidate widened his eyes as he looked at the dent, which was at most the thickness of a leaf, repair itself bit by bit. The whole slate returned to its initial state before his eyes, as though he had not touched it at all before. This slate. Next, the middle-aged man directly ended the candidate's assessment without giving him any time to struggle. The stiff-faced candidate was instantly like a defeated rooster as he left dejectedly. It shouldn't be. No matter how bad, a punch from a person with an orange spirit root should be able to break such a thin piece of stone. How can it be? Discussions over the strangeness of the stone slate started amongst the candidates. This seemingly simple third segment appeared to be completely different from what they thought. Yin Shu's eyes swept over that stone slate, and a bright light glistened in his eyes suddenly after thinking for a while. This is the invasive stone. The invasive stone was an extremely rare mineral. Although it looked like there was no difference from normal stones, this type of stone possessed ductility that normal ores did not. It was completely different from the other stones that could be broken easily, and was instead extremely ductile. If one used only their strength to hit it, all the strength would be resolved by the invasive stone, and there would not be a single bit of damage on it. The candidates, who thought it was merely an easily broken stone slate, felt dark clouds looming over them upon hearing invasive stone. If one had no understanding of the fist intent for a long period of time, it would be difficult to punch a hole in this thing, even if one were to punch it for 10 days and nights straight. The group of people was about to cry. It was all because they were too naive to see Xianling's sex trap. After knowing that it was the invasive stone, the subsequent candidates did not dare to use pure force to hit it. However, they were all quite young, and even if they practiced martial arts from young, they still had a very limited understanding with regards to the fist intent. Moreover, Xianling's sect was famous for its sword faction, and most of the candidates were talented in swordsmanship. As for fist intent, they really did not know much. Candidates went forward one after another. Most only managed to make a faint dent on the invasive stone like the first candidate, while others who were slightly better were able to make a dent as deep as half a finger. Lu Xiaowen was relatively outstanding in this segment. With a punch, he almost broke the invasive stone, and even spread his strength, shattering dents all over. Streaks of tiny cracks appeared on the ever-ductile invasive stone for the first time. The fist faction elder saw the scene through the water moon mirror, and praise could be seen in his eyes. This Lu Xiaowen may have come into contact with boxing before. The formidable Heavens Royals have always spent time on training martial arts, Elder Lin said. At the location of assessment, Lu Xiaowen was satisfied as he looked at the result of his punch, and retreated to a side. As this segment was the last assessment, all the candidates had not left and only retreated to a side. They would leave once all candidates finished their assessment. Lu Xiaowen stood at a side with his eyes fixed on Yun Shu, who went up after him. After Yun Shu hit the invasive stone, a deep dent was formed, but not a single crack appeared. Lu Xiaowen saw this, and a proud expression finally appeared in his eyes. Chapter 119. Simply based on boxing skills, Lu Xiaowen is slightly better than Yun Shu, said the Fist faction elder as he observed carefully. Yun Shu's swordsmanship is better than Lu Xiaowen's, Elder Lin said. However, both of them have pretty strong foundations, and also green spirit roots. I believe that once they enter the sect, they will be to our liking with a little more training, Elder Lin said assertively, implying that he had already approved of Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu passing the entrance assessment. The other elders did not have much to say about this, as they were optimistic about those two people as well. Only Yi Qingtang is left. Through the water moon mirror, the herbal faction elder saw Yi Qingtang walking towards the invasive stone step by step. I wonder how she will do this time, Elder Qin said as he looked at Yi Qingtang with a complicated expression. In the previous two segments, Yi Qingtang steadily won against everyone. If her spirit root were just a little better, she would be able to pass the entrance assessment, even if her results in the third segment were not good. However, Elder Lin glanced at Elder Qin with sarcasm filled in his eyes. Even he was surprised that Yi Qingtang could pass the previous two segments successfully and obtain stunning results. However, Yi Qingtang was at most 15, and her spirit root was extremely inferior. Even if she trained hard, she would not be proficient in everything. As long as Yi Qingtang does not pass the third segment, Xianling sect would definitely not let her enter the sect. No matter how regretful Elder Qin would be, it was still pointless. At this point, not only the four faction elders' attention was focused on Yi Qingtang, even the surrounding candidates looked at the tiny figure one after another. Once Yi Qingtang finished this segment of the assessment, the sect assessment would end, and they would know very quickly whether they were qualified to enter Xianling sect. Yi Qingtang was slightly pale, but it was not because of the invasive stone. It was only because she used too much energy in the absolute kill sword array a while ago. Thus, she looked frail at that point in time. Looking at the dark, black invasive stone before her, there was not a slight hint of emotion in Yi Qingtang's eyes. She stood there quietly, and did not hit it immediately. Instead, she took a deep breath, and closed her eyes slowly in her mind. Memories from her previous life flashed across scene by scene. Suddenly, Yi Qingtang opened her eyes, and a sharp light shone in her clear black orbs. The energy around her whole body flowed, and gathered in her left fist. This slight change shocked the candidates around her. They could faintly sense that a strong aura was being emitted from Yi Qingtang's body. This aura was simply not what a person with a red spirit root could possess. Just when everyone was astonished over Yi Qingtang's action, Yi Qingtang planted her feet firmly on the ground, and the fist which contained all the strength was suddenly hit against the ever-ductile invasive stone. Like a passing breeze, there was not a slight sound in the huge venue. Everyone's eyes were focused on Yi Qingtang's fist which landed on the invasive stone. Below that fair fist, the invasive stone was not at all damaged, and there was not even the faintest dent. Huh. Someone in the crowd suddenly let out a mocking laugh. Suddenly small sounds rang. The middle-aged man, who was in charge of the assessment, was taken aback as well. Perhaps it was because Yi Qingtang's performance was too remarkable in the previous two assessments, that he unconsciously thought that Yi Qingtang would definitely perform well in the third segment. This thought had never disappeared, even when he saw Yi Qingtang directing her energy. Yet unexpectedly, Chapter 120. Not only was Yi Qingtang not outstanding, but she also ended up in such an ugly position instead. Looking at the perfectly flawless invasive stone, the middle-aged man could not help but sigh. Yi Qingtang was already placed at the bottom in the third segment. With such results, it would be impossible for her to enter Xianling sect with a red spirit root. The assessment has ended. All candidates are to move to the entrance of the sect. The results will be announced in a while, said the middle-aged man without emotion, as he brushed away the regret in his heart. Yi Qingtang stood before the invasive stone with a complicated expression, causing one to not understand what was going on. Upon seeing such an outcome, Lu Xiaowen was already all sneers as he knew that there was no chance for Yi Qingtang to enter the Xianling sect with such results. Lucky that he did not need to be bothered about her anymore. This kind of person was simply not worth his time and energy at all. Candidates left successively, but Yi Qingtang stood before the invasive stone without moving a step. Looking at the pale face, the middle-aged man could not bear it, but he knew the sect's strictness. While it was regretful, there was already no way to save the situation. "Miss Yi, should we leave?" Yin Shu walked forward and looked at Yi Qingtang's side profile worriedly. Yi Qingtang suddenly returned to her senses, and after taking a final look at the invasive stone, she turned around and left with Yin Shu. Looking at the two walking away, the middle-aged man shook his head regretfully. In the sect, the four faction elders all had weird expressions upon witnessing the sight. Elder Lin sat on a chair and lifted his chin slightly as he looked at Elder Qin with disdain and sarcasm. Elder Qin had a slightly ugly expression, but did not say anything. Seeing this, the Fist faction elder passed a message through the psychic tablet to the middle-aged man in charge of the assessment. "The assessment has ended. Bring the invasive stone down first." The Fist faction was in charge of this segment, and the invasive stone was normally used by the Fist faction disciples for training. Now that the assessment ended, he would obviously want to bring it back. The middle-aged man heard the message, and, without thinking anything else, brought the hanging invasive stone down as ordered. However, just when the middle-aged man took the invasive stone down, there was suddenly a crisp sound coming from the stone pillar, which the invasive stone was originally hung on. The middle-aged man instinctively looked up, and what laid before his eyes stunned him there, and then as though he was struck by lightning, tiny cracks appeared on the strong and huge stone pillar right in front of him. From where the invasive stone was hung, the tiny cracks stretched to the rest of the stone pillar rapidly, as if they were fiery sparks. In just the blink of an eye, that huge stone pillar split open before his eyes, and tiny cracks directly dismembered the entire stone pillar. Suddenly, countless lumps of gravel fell, and the entire stone pillar collapsed in a moment with a loud bang. The scene left the middle-aged man completely dumbfounded. The invasive stone was extremely ductile, but the stone pillar was made from white corundum. Even knives and guns would not be able to damage it easily, much less the force of one's limbs. However, it actually turned into a lump of gravel right before his eyes. The candidates, who had already started talking about the assessment, as well as the four faction elders through the water moon mirror, were attracted over by the loud roar. When they turned around and saw the scattered mess, astonishment was written all over the four elders' faces. Chapter 121. What is going on? The herbal faction elder was a little dumbfounded. This white corundum was extremely hard. How could it crack just like this? The other elders also had a look of confusion. Only the Fist faction elder seemed to have thought of something, as he suddenly stood up and said, "Invisible force. Yi Qingtang actually knows the invisible force technique?" The invisible force was one of the more profound fist techniques amongst all the fist arts, and was similar to the hitting the cattle from across the mountain technique. However, it was very difficult to see anything strange when one punched. This type of fist technique would not bring any damage to the object being punched, but the fist's force will be transferred backward from the first object that was hit. If there were no objects or living beings backing the first object from behind, then the punch would directly crush the core of the first object. Previously, the Fist faction elder thought that Yi Qingtang really did not know any fist arts, and did not use enough force, which was why there was no trace of damage on the invasive stone. Seeing things now, however, he had thought wrong. On usual assessments, there was a certain distance between the invasive stone and the white corundum, but this time, he specially ordered his disciples to stick the invasive stone against the white corundum, without leaving any gap before the third segment started in order to prevent an accident similar to that in the sword array from happening. Which also meant, if it was on a normal day, Yi Qingtang's punch would definitely crush the entire invasive stone from the inside. Unexpectedly, the slight adjustment made by the Fist faction elder made the white corundum pillar bear all the force from Yi Qingtang's punch. At that moment, the Fist faction elder's expression changed rapidly. Under the constant questioning of other elders, he said the reason. After the elders heard the explanation, the smile on Elder Lin's face fell apart while a smile slowly formed on Elder Qin's face. I really did not expect Yi Qingtang to have such abilities. Elder Qin praised Yi Qingtang openly with no intention of concealing it. The Fist faction elder laughed bitterly as well. This invisible force technique does not use the spirit root's power, and it can amplify one's force to the extreme. It is indeed very suitable for her to use, however. It is difficult to train, and there would be barely any success with less than 10 years of training. Yi Qingtang is only 15. Could it be that she started training the invisible force technique ever since she was 5 years old? Guesses filled the few elders' minds as they saw Yi Qingtang's stunning performance. It could be. Previously, when the grade of Yi Qingtang's spirit root was revealed, I thought it was strange. Mu Su knows the sect's rules, and if he really recommended a red spirit root person here, it might not be a good thing for him. After all, we will only give one's chance for assessment. If the person Mu Su recommended doesn't pass the assessment, it will not look good on him as well. Elder Qin thought for a while and continued. It must be that Yi Qingtang knows her spirit root is not good enough, and thus, painstakingly trained other things. Mu Su realized this, and made an exception to recommend her to our sect. All the elders found Elder Qin's words logical. However, they would need to make a change to the issue that they discussed a while ago. Yi Qingtang ranked first in all 3 segments of the assessment. Even if she has a red spirit root, we should still give a chance to such a skilled youth like her. The Fist faction elder was also in approval of Yi Qingtang's mastery of the invisible force technique, and, naturally, did not object. Similarly, the Herbal faction elder was amiable, and did not object. The only elder who had not expressed his view was Elder Lin, who had always been on opposing ends with Elder Qin. Chapter 122. Outside the main entrance of Xianling sect stood hundreds of candidates. At that instant, everyone could not help but become nervous. The 3 segments of assessment for the Xianling sect revolved around the array, sword and fist factions respectively. The other herbal faction was not what candidates could participate in. The results of the 3 segments decided whether they were able to step into Xianling sect's main entrance today and become a sect disciple. Once they entered the sect, they would no longer be the same as ordinary people. Regardless of the sect's halo or the rare treasures in the sect, both were full of spirit energy, and this was a very appealing attraction for ambitious youth like them. If they were able to enter the sect, not just them, but the entire family clan would be proud of the fact. Time passed, and everyone seemed uneasy. Only 3 people were calm. Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu's results were outstanding in all 3 segments, and their spirit roots were excellent. Thus, they had nothing to be worried about. The only remaining person was Yi Qingtang. At that moment, Yi Qingtang stood aside with her eyes looked down. She was confused as to why she was not able to crush the invasive stone with her punch just now. In other candidates' eyes, her silence was a display of her despair. Her spirit root was the most inferior, and that had already become her fatal point. Although other candidates did not see Yi Qingtang's results in the previous 2 segments of the assessment, it should be extremely terrible when estimating according to the duration of her assessment. Moreover, in the 3rd segment, Yi Qingtang did not even leave a trace of damage on the invasive stone with her punch. Even if the results were not out, they were aware. Yi Qingtang did not have the slightest chance of entering the sect. There was no shortage of people gloating at her misfortune. Previously, when Yi Qingtang was the first to step on the path to heaven, they were already in a bad mood, as they were outshone by someone with a red spirit root. Looking at Yi Qingtang's miserable state now, they were proud to be superior to her. However, most of the candidates did not pay much attention to Yi Qingtang, and were more preoccupied with their own results. Yun Shu stood beside Yi Qingtang all along. There were a few times where he wanted to comfort Yi Qingtang, yet felt that not saying anything and giving silence was the best choice. Brother Yin, what do you think will be the results of this assessment? Lu Xiaowen walked up and stared at Yun Shu, who he believed was his only competitor, without looking at Yi Qingtang at all. The results are not out yet. It is simply the sect's judgment, Yin Shu said without emotion. Lu Xiuwen, and he did not share the same values from the start, and thus he naturally did not want to speak much. The sect's judgment is, of course, important, but Brother Yin should be clear whether you and I will be able to enter the sect. Since you already have an idea, why do you still need to waste your time? From now on, some people will be completely different from you and me. Lu Xiuwen did not mention anything about Yi Qingtang, but every word he said was directed against her. Yin Shu frowned slightly. Lu Xiuwen chuckled lightly and looked at Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang, I remember very clearly the words you made me remember a while ago. I said if you could enter Xianling sect, won't I be a useless piece of trash? Now it is enough to prove that my words weren't wrong, isn't it? Lu Xiuwen sneered. Yi Qingtang swept her eyes across Lu Xiuwen, and a seeming smile played on her lips. Whether it is right or wrong, it is still too early to decide now. Chapter 123. Why is it still too early? Lu Xiuwen scoffed as he lifted his chin and glanced over at Yi Qingtang with despise. Perhaps someone has no self-awareness and is still struggling hard when death is at hand. Yi Qingtang did not bother with Lu Xiuwen's ridicule anymore, and stood there silently, waiting for the moment when the results were released. As for Lu Xiuwen, he was unwilling to waste any more saliva on someone with no qualification to enter the sect. After taking a look at her, he stood aside, only wanting to see the moment when Yi Qingtang's hopes were dashed. Her expression would be so satisfying to watch. Not long later, the middle-aged man, who was in charge of the assessment, appeared in front of them once again. All the candidates trembled and strained their ears, waiting for the revelation of the final results. This assessment is finished, and our sect already knows of everyone's performance. Now, the names that I read out are those who have passed the assessment and have the qualification to become an outer sect disciple of Xianling sect. The middle-aged man said sternly as he looked over the crowd. Everyone's eyes were focused on one point. They eagerly hoped to hear their name from the middle-aged man's mouth. Su Wan. The middle-aged man read the first name. A beautiful young girl walked out from the many candidates. Delight and agitation were written all over her lovely face. Suppressing all her emotions, she tried hard to remain calm, and walked in front of everyone. From this moment on, she was a disciple of Xianling sect. Many envious gazes landed on her successively, and upon feeling those eyes on her, she took a deep breath and lifted her chin. The middle-aged man continued, "Mou." A handsome young man was the second to walk up. Compared to Su Wan, his expression was relatively calmer, but the agitation in his eyes revealed his inner feelings. These two people both had a yellow spirit root, and were outstanding in the sword array, an invasive stone assessment. Passing the assessment was not unexpected to others. As the middle-aged man read out name after name, a group of people amongst all the candidates were in utter despair. Until then, the middle-aged man had already read out over 10 names, but all of them had yellow spirit roots without exception. Until then, a candidate with an orange spirit root had not appeared, and this made those with an orange spirit root rather disheartened. The gap in the grade of spirit root really could not be crossed. Even if their performance was similar, those with yellow spirit roots were prioritized and chosen. Moreover, just based on performance, almost none of those with an orange spirit root could win against those with a yellow spirit root. The initially hopeful candidates with orange spirit roots hung their heads low gloomily, as the despair in their heart already told them the final outcome. Xianling sect did not need people with such an inferior spirit root like them. Lu Xiuwen, the middle-aged man said again. Lu Xiuwen, who was prepared long ago, stepped out of the envious crowd with a face full of confidence, and not a single hint of agitation. With his ability, it was to be expected for him to enter the sect. What he wanted was not just a placement as an outer sect disciple of Xianling sect. In the future, he would want even more things. Yin Shu walked forward immediately after. The assessment results for both of them were within the expectations of everyone. There was nothing surprising about it. Until then, all the names of the candidates were read out in reverse order. As Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu's assessment results were revealed, those whose names were not read out completely gave up hope. Now they were no longer candidates, but a group of sad people who had no fate with the sect. How could a noble sect allow them to scream and shout here? Everyone remained silent as dissatisfaction and despair overwhelmed them. The middle-aged man was simply unwilling to waste any more time on the group of people, and turned to face the selected candidates including Yi Qingtang. From now on you all are outer sect disciples of Xianling sect. Follow me into the sect. Yes, everyone replied simultaneously. Without saying anything more, the middle-aged man turned around and stepped into the sect's entrance. Behind him were over 10 young boys and girls in high spirits. At that moment, they could not care about how Yi Qingtang entered the sect. As long as they ensured that they could enter the sect, it was already very fortunate. From the start to the end, only Lu Ziyuan's shocked eyes never left Yi Qingtang. Chapter 125. Yi Qingtang sensed Lu Ziyuan's gaze. This time, she turned around slightly, and a maddening smile formed on her face. Lu Xiaowen, do you still remember what you said previously? If even you can enter the sect, won't I be a useless piece of trash? The sentence Lu Xiaowen said initially smashed on himself like a huge rock. Never had Lu Xiaowen dreamt that Yi Qingtang could really enter Xianling sect. His good-looking face turned blue, as though he was given 2 big slaps publicly, making him look extremely ugly. Lu Xiaowen secretly clenched his teeth and forcefully suppressed the dissatisfaction in his heart, without taking another look at Yi Qingtang. Otherwise he would really be pissed to death by her. The days ahead are still long. There was still a long time in Xianling sect in the future. He would definitely not allow such a lowly Yi Qingtang to succeed. Lu Ziyuan's reactions fell into Yi Qingtang's eyes. She was very happy and satisfied. In this life, she needed to return back to Lu Xiaowen hundreds, and even 1,000 times the pain that he had brought her in her previous life. The days ahead were still long. She has the time. Congratulations, Miss Yi. A gentle voice sounded beside Yi Qingtang. Yi Qingtang turned around and saw her senior brother Yun's good man smile, and his sincere eyes. Now we're all disciples of Xianling sect. Don't address me as Miss Yi now. Is it fine if I call you senior brother Yin? Yi Qingtang looked at Yun Shu smilingly. Though she was like a devil, she distinguished kindness and hatred clearly. She would not forget Yun Shu's kindness towards her. Yun Shu was stunned. He felt that Yi Qingtang's smile was like a sunny day in March, so bright that he felt a little dizzy. She said senior brother Yin so naturally, as though she had been long familiar with such a form of address. Yun Shu returned to his senses and quietly laughed at his weird thought, as today was the first time he met Yi Qingtang. That is my honor, junior sister. Hearing the words junior sister made it seem as if Yi Qingtang returned to her previous life. The senior brother Yin, who protected her throughout her most miserable period of time, finally returned. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes. She had not forgotten her previous suspicions. Now that she entered Xianling sect together with Yun Shu, she would be extremely careful and definitely investigate what exactly happened in the previous lifetime for such a bright and talented Yun Shu to be tortured into that abject state. In this life, it would be her who protects him. The friendly relationship between Yi Qingtang and Yun Shu fell into Lu Ziyuan's eyes. From the start, Yun Shu was the biggest competitor in his heart, and Yi Qingtang was even more a piece of trash that offended him. Seeing the two of them like that annoyed him even further. Xianling sect's assessment ended, and the selected candidates were elated. The few elders within the sect who discussed the final outcome left successively and returned to their posts. Only Elder Qin stayed a little while at the water-moon mirror. As he looked at Yi Qingtang through the water-moon mirror, his eyes had a complicated expression, but more than that, they were filled with regret. Elder Qin, the preparation for the Lingyu array is completed. Please return and take a look. said an Array faction disciple as he invited Elder Qin to leave. Elder Qin sighed lightly. Such a pity, really such a pity. All of Yi Qingtang's performances stunned him deeply. If Yi Qingtang did not have a red spirit root, with just her level of talent, Elder Qin would definitely make an exception and directly accept her as an inner sect disciple of the Array faction. However, ultimately it was such a pity. Chapter 126. No one in 100 years would be able to compete against Yi Qingtang's results in the third segment. Even the dissatisfied Elder Lin did not speak a word about Yi Qingtang entering Xianling sect. How was it that such a talented and amazing young girl had only a red spirit root? The more Elder Qin thought about it, the more despondent he was. If he had not known that a spirit root was hard to upgrade, he really would not give up. As long as Yi Qingtang had an orange or yellow spirit root, the other 3 sect elders would most probably want to fight over Yi Qingtang. However, Elder Qin could only sigh, shake his head and leave. Once she entered the sect, how she developed herself from then on would be all up to her. At that very moment, Elder Lin, who left the assessment observation location, returned to the sword faction with a gloomy expression. Upon seeing Elder Lin's unhappy face, the sect disciples cautiously retreated to a side and bowed respectfully without daring to utter a word. Xianling sect was famous for its sword faction, and the sword faction was the most important. All the disciples would need to enter the sword faction to practice swordsmanship, and thus, Elder Lin's position in Xianling sect was self-evident. Returning to the main hall of the sword faction, Elder Lin sat on the chair with a deep frown. He felt a stifling feeling as he thought of Elder Qin's proud reaction upon knowing Yi Qingtang's real result for the third segment. Elder Lin, a tall and handsome young man, entered the hall and greeted Elder Lin obediently. Elder Lin was initially unhappy, but his stiff expression relaxed when he saw the young man. Ning Luo, is there anything that you're finding me for now? Elder Lin asked as he looked at the disciple before him, whom he was extremely satisfied with. Regarding the absolute kill sword array, I have already brought people to investigate it. There is nothing strange about the sword array. However, it was used to fight against demonic beasts a few months ago, and perhaps it wasn't stable yet. I have already changed the raw stone in the sword array, and there should not be any more problems, Ning Luo said. Elder Lin nodded satisfyingly. Ning Luo, you're the disciple whom I think the most highly of. I have always been at ease with you handling matters. I do not wish for the sword array accident to happen again in the future. Do order people to keep a tighter eye on it. Yes, I will, Ning Luo replied. Is there any other thing? Elder Lin asked. Ning Luo paused as he saw Elder Lin's slightly gloomy expression from the corner of his eyes. I will definitely put in my best regarding the sword array, so please do not be troubled over it. Don't let it affect your health. Elder Lin was very comforted. Yet, once he thought of Elder Qin's expression when he asked whether Yi Qingtang passed the assessment, Elder Lin's face darkened again. I'm fine. It's only that the Array faction elder thinks highly of a disciple who newly entered the sect. To think that my Xianling sect would actually have a disciple with a red spirit root, it's very shameful, and we would be ridiculed by other sects. Red spirit root? Ning Luo was surprised as well. Elder Lin sneered. That disciple is Yi Qingtang. She was personally recommended by Mu Su, and Elder Lin thinks pretty highly of her. However, she is ultimately still a red spirit root, and will not become anything big. I'm only afraid she would affect our sect's reputation. There were very few people with orange spirit roots in all sects, and it was such an absurdity that they accepted a red spirit root as an outer sect disciple. Ning Luo did not say anything, but upon hearing Yi Qingtang, a weird expression flashed across his eyes suddenly. Was not Yi Qingtang the person whom Yi warned about? She really passed the sect assessment. Chapter 127. Whatever. You can go down first. It seemed that Elder Lin was unwilling to say anything more as he waved a hand and allowed Ning Luo to retreat first. Ning Luo left the main hall with many thoughts running across his head. Senior brother Ning, arrangements for the outer sect disciples are already made. I heard that there are 2 green spirit roots this time, said one inner sect disciple, who went up to Ning Luo upon seeing him. Ning Luo returned to his senses and said flatly, even if they have green spirit roots, they're still merely outer sect disciples. We are from the inner sect. There's no need to be bothered with it. There was a big difference between the inner and outer sect. In every sect, there were many outer sect disciples, but everyone knew that only getting into the inner sect would they be considered a real disciple of the sect and learn the sect's mystic techniques. That's true. That disciple scratched his head and continued. I saw that Elder Lin was unhappy when he came back just now. Did anything happen in the assessment? Ning Luo wanted to say something, but when he thought of what Yi Yu said previously, a sly look emerged in his eyes. Nothing much actually. He just met with some irritating thing. This year, things are not as simple as just having only 2 disciples with green spirit roots in the outer sect. Other than that, our sect even accepted a young girl with a red spirit root as an exception. Red spirit root? The disciple's eyes almost fell out when he heard it. Are you joking? How can a red spirit root enter the sect? Ning Luo laughed. It is no longer important whether it is possible or not. What is important is that the person has already entered our outer sect. That disciple's expression turned weird. Ning Luo did not say anything else to him, and his mind was preoccupied on another matter. Yi Qingtang was the person whom Yi Yu wanted him to give special treatment to. Previously, when Yi Yu's letter mentioned Yi Qingtang, Ning Luo was not concerned about it. After all, Yi Yu did clearly write that Yi Qingtang was only a red spirit root. Ning Luo originally thought that it was definitely impossible for such a person to enter Xianling's sect. Yet unexpectedly, things did not go as one wished. Ning Luo was very clear that none of the sects would make an exception for anyone to accept them as a disciple. If they did not pass the assessment, the sect would not give the mighty figures any face regardless of who they are. He really did not expect Yi Qingtang to pass the Xianling sect entrance assessment with a red spirit root. However, a smile hung on Ning Luo's lips. Regardless of how Yi Qingtang entered Xianling's sect, she was already a Xianling sect disciple from the moment she entered the sect. If she was someone Yi Yu wanted to take care of, he would naturally not let Yi Qingtang be too happy in Xianling's sect. Come here. Ning Luo waved at a disciple nearby, who went forward immediately. Help me pass a message to Zhou Xian from the outer sect, Ning Luo said. Zhou Xian? Senior brother Ning. Just tell me what you want me to pass on to him, replied the disciple very obediently. Ning Luo had outstanding skills, and was one of the best amongst the inner sect disciples. Moreover, the sword faction's Elder Lin favored him, and thus he had a certain level of influence in the inner sect. Ning Luo smiled, and had the person lean over as he quietly whispered something into his ears. After listening to it, the disciple could not help but look shocked. However, his face returned to normal very quickly. Senior brother Ning, I will definitely pass this message. Go ahead. Ning Luo waved a hand without emotions. Yes. Looking at that disciple's departing back view, the smile on Ning Luo's face deepened. Yi Qingtang, I will definitely take care of you well on behalf of Yi Yu. Chapter 128. The middle-aged man brought the selected candidates into the outer sect. Everything in the sect amazed the young boys and girls who just entered the sect. However, they were all very smart to suppress their emotions and listen to the middle-aged man's orders detailedly. The outer sect disciples stayed at the same location with 3 people in a room, males and females separated. Yi Qingtang was assigned to a room. Apart from her, Su Wan, who entered as the same batch as her, was assigned to that room as well. In the room, other than the 2 new disciples, there was another person. The moment she opened the door and entered the room, Yi Qingtang saw an aloof figure sitting at a table alone. Even when she and Su Wan entered the room, that girl had not looked up at all. Su Wan greets senior sister. The gentle Su Wan was very sensible, and stepped forward to greet the girl obediently when she saw the girl sitting there. That girl was tall, and had sharp features, but exuded detachment and indifference. When she heard Su Wan's voice, she merely took a look perfunctorily, without replying a single word. Su Wan's expression turned a little ugly, but she smartly did not show anything on her face. She walked to an empty bed at a side, and unpacked her luggage a little. Yi Qingtang's gaze swept over that aloof girl, but a yearning expression emerged in her eyes. In her previous life, she was also allocated into this room, and there was not a change in the people in the room. Su Wan was still Su Wan, and this aloof girl still remained there. She was Lin Long. She had a green spirit root, and was pretty talented. However, she was usually very silent, and did not bother others at all. That time, Yi Qingtang stayed in this room for many years, and only heard Lin Long say a few words in total. Yi Qingtang originally did not have anything to do with Lin Long, but because Lin Long once stepped up to resolve Yi Qingtang's predicament, Yi Qingtang remembered this favor. Yi Qingtang greets senior sister Lin. Yi Qingtang stepped forward slowly, and said with gratitude. A word senior sister Lin made Lin Long, who was looking down, look up slightly at the stunning-looking girl in front of her. How do you know my name? Lin Long's cold voice rang. There is a Lin sewed on senior sister Lin's sleeve, so I took a bold guess. Yi Qingtang smiled. Lin Long looked down at the barely legible Lin word on the bamboo leaves image sewed on her sleeves. Her eyes glistened as she raised her head, and took a look at Yi Qingtang, though her expression remained the same. Yi Qingtang? I'll remember. Afterward, she continued looking at the book in her hand without wanting to say any more. Yi Qingtang had been used to Lin Long's aloofness long ago, and did not think much about it, as she went to settle her own matters. The rooms of Xianling's sect's disciples were relatively wide. Even if there were 3 people in a room, each person had their own individual space, and it did not seem crowded. Yi Qingtang laid her bedsheets and sat by her bed, carrying the little lightning dragon, which had been nested in her arms for a long time. The little figure seemed a little tired, and laid in Yi Qingtang's arms listlessly with its tiny head in Yi Qingtang's palm. Yi Qingtang realized that once the little lightning dragon turned into human form, it would become unusually frail. It was also the first time Yi Qingtang raised a lightning dragon, and she really could not understand what was going on with it. Luckily, it did not have any other special reaction apart from being tired. Only then was she put at ease. After feeding the little lightning dragon a few spirit stones, Yi Qingtang started thinking about how to walk down the route in the sect. Chapter 129. In her previous life, it was hard for Yi Qingtang to train in the sect. Even if she feigned a spirit root, she still did not have a spirit root in reality. Hence, it was especially difficult for her when she was cultivating in the sect. For a cultivation technique that others would be able to learn in a day or two, she would require over 10 times the duration, only to be able to barely compete with others. Precisely because her cultivation was slow, she seemed exceptionally clumsy amongst all the disciples, and suffered quite a lot. But this time, everything was different. The black heaven water that Yi Qingtang required was within the sect's mystic realm. Yi Qingtang knew of it quite late back then, and that item had already been obtained by an inner sect disciple. This time, she came at just the right time, and she would have to enter the inner sect as soon as possible if she wanted to obtain the black heaven water. And only by entering the inner sect would she obtain the sect's highest level martial techniques. The outer sect was just a step of hers. She must think of a way to pass the inner sect assessment within a year. Otherwise, she would have no fate with the black heaven water. It would be even more difficult for her to recover from the loss of her spirit root, and grow her new spirit root. At the thought of this, Yi Qingtang was very motivated, and had a clearer image of what she had to do next. After a short rest, the newly entered disciples had to gather outside to listen to allocations. While Yi Qingtang just started preparing to leave, Su Wan had already left ahead of her. Obviously, although Su Wan was not welcomed by Lin Long, she did not intend to interact with Yi Qingtang. To this, Yi Qingtang was not bothered at all. At the public square in the outer sect, all the newly entered disciples were gathered. Yi Qingtang arrived a little later, Upon seeing Yi Qingtang, Yin Shu, who had already changed into Xianling sect's uniform and was standing at the public square, could not help but show a gentle smile. Junior sister Yi, you're the only one left. Hurry up. Yi Qingtang chuckled and stood beside Yin Shu immediately. The middle-aged man who was in charge of the assessment had left, and the person standing before Yi Qingtang, and the rest was an outer sect elder. Sects are divided into the inner sect and outer sect, with the disciples in the former being in a respectable place that outer sect disciples could not be compared to. Thus, the elders in charge of the outer sect were Xianling sect's second-class elders. One would not have any fate to meet the real elders from the four factions if they did not enter the inner sect. The elder standing in front of them was donned in gray, and his both hands were behind his back. He looked over 50 years old and had a strict expression. Looking over the crowd, he frowned slightly when he saw Yi Qingtang, but did not say anything much. He simply said to the group of new disciples, "After entering Xianling sect today, you all are no longer the same as those people outside. You must remember that you are a disciple of Xianling sect, and regardless of what you do, the sect's honor must be placed as a priority. From today onwards, you will enter the outer sect's sword faction to cultivate your swordsmanship. You are to listen to all the arrangements by the sect. If there's anyone who dares to go against the sect's rules, the person will be expelled from the sect and never be allowed in ever again." Yi Qingtang did not know whether it was real or not, but she kept feeling that the outer sect elder seemed to be looking at her when he mentioned the sect's honor. She touched the tip of her nose. It seemed that all the elders already knew that she passed the assessment with a red spirit root. Indeed, in sects where orange spirit roots were already very rare, her only red spirit root was already unusually eye-catching. Chapter 130. Despite the fact that Yi Qingtang passed the 3 segments of the entrance assessment with flying colors, her red spirit root was still ultimately displeasing to all elders. Very obviously, the elder from the outer sect's sword faction did not think highly of Yi Qingtang, who had a red spirit root. Even if the elder did not show any extreme behavior, the casual look on his face already revealed his despise and belittlement. Yi Qingtang had already expected this, as she experienced the same thing in her previous life as well. However, having a red spirit root today did not mean she would have a red spirit root her entire life. After admonishing the new disciples for a while, the elder from the outer sect sword faction informed them of the rules in the sect. The sect would assign certain missions for disciples apart from cultivation. Upon completion of the missions, the disciples would obtain Xianming points from the sect. These Xianming points had a special meaning in the sect. Not only could the disciples use the points to exchange for elixirs and martial technique scrolls, but it could also be used to exchange for the right to use the Holy Land for cultivation. It could be said that the Xianming points were equal to another type of currency within the sect. It could bring even more opportunities for cultivation and benefits for all disciples. Other than the assigned missions, one could also obtain the Xianming points by heading to the rewards pavilion and completing any mission of their choice, where points were rewarded correspondingly. After he was done announcing the rules of the outer sect, the elder from the outer sect's sword faction nodded at a disciple behind him. That disciple went forward immediately. In his hands was a tray with dozens of small porcelain bottles placed in it. Yi Qingtang's eyes shone when she saw the porcelain bottles. At the same time, the elder said once again, "This is the She Spirit Pill. In the future, everyone will be given 2 bottles of the She Spirit Pill every month." Looks of happiness could be seen in the new disciples' eyes when they heard the elder's words. The She Spirit Pill was a rather rare elixir, which was extremely helpful for their cultivation. However, outside the sect, even royals had difficulty buying such an elixir. These kinds of elixirs could only be refined in sects, and the prescriptions were held in the hands of the herbal faction's elders without circulating it outside. If brought outside the sect, such a She Spirit Pill would still be in short supply even if it were to be sold for over thousands per pill. Yet in the sect, this was given to disciples monthly. 2 bottles of She Spirit pill were enough for the new disciples to feel the distance between the sect and the outside world. And this was merely the most basic thing. Those She Spirit pills were quickly placed into the hands of the new disciples, and almost everyone held it exceptionally carefully. Even for disciples from prominent backgrounds such as Lu Xiaowen and Yun Shu, they could not help but wear a happy expression when they saw the She Spirit pills. This was an item that normal people were unable to obtain. Yi Qingtang's lips tugged up as she looked at the She Spirit pill. This item was really a good thing. The She Spirit pills could help her in her cultivation, and even nourish her newly grown spirit root. The She Spirit pill had a strong spirit energy, and what her spirit root needed to grow was none other than spirit energy. After handing out the She Spirit pills, the elder left straight away without saying much. In the outer sect, the elder would not teach the disciples martial arts directly. If they wanted to cultivate, they had to go to the sword faction pavilion and listen to the lessons by the elders of the outer sect. Just when everyone was excited over obtaining the She Spirit pills, they did not notice a few devious pairs of eyes staring at the She Spirit pills in their hands. Chapter 131. Everyone was in high spirits after receiving the She Spirit pills, and wanted to use the pills to further improve themselves in their cultivation. Just when the new disciples were preparing to leave, a bustling noise suddenly came from the side of the public square. A group of outer sect disciples were gathered together, and having a jolly time. That lively scene attracted the group of disciples, who just entered the outer sect of Xianling sect, and many headed in that direction out of curiosity. In the crowd, there was a 10-square-meter empty space in the center of the crowd, where a tall outer sect disciple stood imposingly. From the surrounding people's discussions, the new disciples finally understood what was going on. The person standing in the middle of the crowd was called Zhou Chu. He had been in the outer sect for 2 to 3 years, and although his skills were not top-notch, he was ranked in the top 1,000 people amongst over 3,000 people in the outer sect. Now, Zhou Chu was standing there to set up an arena. Malicious fighting was completely banned in sects. Infighting amongst disciples in the same sect was all the more disallowed. Otherwise, they would receive extremely strict punishments. The arena was the only place where disciples could exchange blows with each other openly, though it was to be of a suitable degree and could not be overly extreme. The way Zhou Chu started an arena was very interesting. He challenged the outer sect disciples ranked in the last 2,000 places, and both parties would bet with She Spirit pills where the winning party could obtain the pills. Everyone was aware of how precious the She Spirit pills were, and once the new disciples heard that the arena actually used the She Spirit pills as a bet, they were instantly interested. However, they were not fools. No matter what, Zhou Chu had been a disciple in the sect for 2 to 3 years, and there was no comparability between them, the newly joined disciples and him. We don't have much to do with this arena. How can we possibly beat senior brother Zhou? A new disciple sighed rather disappointingly. Although there was the She Spirit pill as bait, they were still self-aware. That new disciple's lament traveled into Zhou Chu's ears, and Zhou Chu laughed. This junior brother over here, I'm afraid you're mistaken. I don't require you to beat me on this arena. As long as you all can withstand 3 of my moves, I will gift you all a bottle of She Spirit pill. If you can withstand 6 moves, I will gift you 2 bottles. With these words, those new disciples who previously dropped the idea suddenly had a glimmer of hope. If they really had to fight with Zhou Chu, they would definitely not be able to win. However, if they only had to receive his 3 moves, why not give it a try? Many thoughts ran across everyone's mind. She Spirit pills were precious, and although they obtained 2 bottles, it was definitely a case of the more the better. Immediately, the group of new disciples was a little swayed. Their reactions fell into Zhou Chu's eyes, and a cold scoff emerged in his eyes. Upon seeing the excited expression of the junior brothers and sisters, the old outer sect disciples from aside could not help but quietly shake their heads. Someone might just be baited again. Yi Qingtang and Yun Shu were about to leave, but were attracted over by the noise. A sneer hung on the corner of Yi Qingtang's lips when she saw Zhou Chu's face. Rather, it was Yin Shu who was interested in the arena. You can obtain a bottle of She Spirit Pill, as long as you receive 3 moves? This arena is pretty interesting, Yin Shu chuckled. Chapter 132. Pretty interesting? Yi Qingtang scoffed in her heart. This Zhou Chu was an acquaintance of hers in her previous life. Zhou Chu's ability was slightly above average in the outer sect, and was not considered outstanding. But the arena he set up was a nightmare for plenty of new disciples. Zhou Chu's arena appeared to be targeted against all the disciples ranked below him, and seemed easy since one would win only by receiving 3 moves from him. But only those who went up the arena would know how fierce these 3 moves were. Zhou Chu specialized in fist techniques, and the force from his one punch was enough to crumble a boulder. Unless one was made from steel, which disciple would dare to take his 3 moves? The old outer sect disciples already knew Zhou Chu's trap from long ago, and would naturally not be fooled. This arena by Zhou Chu was used to cajole new disciples. The new disciples had just obtained the She Spirit Pills, and with Zhou Chu opening an arena here thereafter, wasn't he simply waiting for them to suffer from their own actions? In Yi Qingtang's previous life, she saw many newly entered disciples being beaten up by Zhou Chu until they spat blood because of their greed. On the other hand, Zhou Chu used this to obtain a fair amount of She Spirit Pills from the new disciples. If not for the support of those She Spirit Pills, how was he able to climb up to the first 1,000 ranks? Yi Qingtang looked at the same trick that Zhou Chu had used in both her previous and current life, and fell into a trance. She was also duped in her previous life, and ended up spitting blood from being beaten by Zhou Chu, while the She Spirit Pills that were just handed to her were also snatched away by Zhou Chu. Senior brother Yin wants to give it a try? Yi Qingtang returned to her senses, and turned to ask Yin Shu. Yin Shu was slightly taken aback and chuckled. I'm a little interested, but I'll take a look for the time being. Just as Yin Shu was hesitating, a person went up the arena a step ahead of him. Looking up, Yi Qingtang sneered in her heart. The first person who went up the arena was not anyone else but Lu Xiuwen. I just need to receive 3 moves from you, and I can obtain a bottle of She Spirit Pill? Lu Xiuwen stood on the arena arrogantly. After looking at Lu Xiuwen, Zhou Chu flashed a friendly smile. That's right. I wonder what's this junior brother's name? Lu Xiuwen replied, Lu Xiuwen. Zhou Chu's face froze slightly. The purpose of setting up this arena was to trick those new disciples who did not know what was going on into losing the She Spirit Pills to him. However, he was not foolish as well. He had already asked around when the new disciples entered the sect. In this batch, there were 2 people with green spirit roots who were relatively skilled and born in renowned families. He did not expect that the first to go up the stage was actually Lu Xiuwen. So it's junior brother Lu. I've long heard that you have amazing natural endowments, and now that I see you, it's indeed so. There's no need to continue this competition, Zhou Chu said smoothly, and immediately handed a bottle of She Spirit Pill into Lu Xiuwen's hands. Treat this bottle of She Spirit Pill as a first meeting gift from me to Lu junior brother. In the future, we will be martial brothers from the same sect. Zhou Chu was smart. Lu Xiuwen was pretty skilled, and also a formidable Heaven's Royals. Establishing good relations with such a person was obviously the best choice. Seeing the She Spirit Pill being handed to him, Lu Xiuwen did not say anything much, and left the arena straight away. This sight made the other new disciples even more excited. I'll do it. A new disciple hurriedly went up the arena, as though he was deeply afraid that Zhou Chu would lose all the She Spirit Pills to others who went before him, and not have any left to give him. Zhou Chu asked the other party's background as usual, but this time, he was not as amiable as he was to Lu Xiuwen previously, and directly started a match. Chapter 133. The new disciple also knew that he was definitely not Zhou Chu's opponent. But based on the fact that his own physique was not bad, he thought that no matter how poorly skilled he was, he would not be knocked out from 3 blows. Even if he were to sustain some injuries, he would still be able to forcefully hold out. This thought came across the minds of many new disciples. Logically, there was nothing wrong with this thought. Unless there was an extremely huge disparity between the two parties, it was almost impossible for one to knock out the other party in 3 moves. If Zhou Chu were an inner sect disciple, no one would dare to receive his punches, but since he was also in the outer sect, they believed that there was not too big of a gap in their abilities. Expectantly, the new disciple directed his energy and stood still as he waited to receive the 3 moves and take the She Spirit pill. Zhou Chu looked full of smiles, but in reality, a force already gathered in his hands. He suddenly attacked, greeting the new disciple with his fist. Since the new disciple was to receive the attack, he could also strike a move to handle the attack, as long as he could receive the next move. When the two of them exchanged blows, Zhou Chu landed a heavy punch straight on the other party's face, and that disciple immediately raised a hand to block the attack, receiving the first move. Although it was rather strenuous, joy riled up in the new disciple's heart. Indeed, receiving a few of Zhou Chu's moves was not tough. While the force of Zhou Chu's punch was very huge, he was not cunning in his attacks, so there should not be a problem in forcefully receiving the attacks. A while later, Zhou Chu struck a second move, and this was also safely received by the new disciple. The continuous 2 moves fell into the eyes of the onlookers. After seeing that Zhou Chu's moves were neither swift nor fierce, the new disciples who were still hesitant immediately let down their guard and clenched their fists in preparation to give it a try. Seeing the new disciples letting down their guards, Yi Qingtang silently shook her head from the side. Zhou Chu's trick was really effective. In the 3 moves, the most crucial one was the 3rd move. Zhou Chu struck and landed his 3rd move, which appeared exactly the same as the previous moves with the same speed that one could easily withstand. However, just when that new disciple raised his hand to receive the move and met Zhou Chu's fist, he could only feel a violent force like that of a fierce tiger running downhill, penetrating from the fist into his entire body. That force was extremely huge and was simply not what he could bear. Before he could return to his senses, his entire body was flung out from the huge force. Everyone thought that Zhou Chu's 3 moves were rather easy to receive, and no one would have thought that the new disciple would suddenly miss at the last move. With the disciple losing at the 3rd move, the fight was naturally over. That disciple held on his painful chest and looked up at Zhou Chu, who was fake smiling. Only he would know that the ordinary-looking 3rd move was utterly different from the 2 moves exchanged previously. Many new disciples around him still found it a pity, as they felt that he was so close to winning a bottle of She Spirit pill. Now, not only did that new disciple not win the She Spirit pill, he lost She Spirit pill that he just obtained to Zhou Chu. It's really a pity, junior brother. Just a little more, and you could have received the 3rd move. Zhou Chu purposely sighed regrettably with an evil glint in his eyes as he held the She Spirit pill he obtained. Amongst these new disciples, how many could withstand 1 punch from him? If he didn't go easy first, how else could he let this group of little bastards bear hope and come forward to gift him the She Spirit pills one by one? Chapter 134. If Zhou Chu used all his force from the start, definitely no one would dare to go up. But with such a cover-up, the disciples would immediately think that they have a chance of winning. To catch a big fish, one must cast a long line. Zhou Chu was really skillful in using this strategy. Moreover, the new disciples were not old. 15-16-year-olds were very easy to be duped. As expected, when the first new disciple lost a bottle of She Spirit pill, a few other new disciples went up successively. Those new disciples, without exception, did not have any energy to block Zhou Chu's 3rd move. 1 or 2 times was a coincidence, but if so many people lost at the 3rd move, it would be really dumb of those new disciples if they still did not realize anything fishy. In just a short while, Zhou Chu collected 5 to 6 bottles of She Spirit pills. Subtracting the bottle he gave to Lu Xiuwen, he still gained quite a lot. Seeing as to how the remaining new disciples began to be more vigilant, Zhou Chu knew that no one else in this new batch would be fooled anymore. This senior brother Zhou is misbehaving. Yun Shu, who had already seen Zhou Chu's scheme, could not help but frown and feel unhappy. Yi Qingtang narrowed her eyes and looked at the dejected look of the disciples who lost their she-spirit pills, as though she saw herself in her previous life. Having 2 bottles of she-spirit pills every month already was not ample enough. Now that 1 bottle was snatched away when they just received it, the remaining 1 bottle was simply not enough to support their consumption for a month. With such dissipation, the new disciples would definitely suffer a loss in their cultivation. Yi Qingtang suddenly turned around and replied to Yun Shu, "Senior brother Yin, let's play a round, should we?" Yun Shu was slightly taken aback and did not know what Yi Qingtang's words meant. Yi Qingtang quietly said a few words by Yun Shu's ears, and Yun Shu could not help but widen his eyes. On the arena, Zhou Chu waited for a while, and after realizing that no fishes were going to be baited anymore, he then prepared to stop. But just when Zhou Chu was about to leave, a small figure suddenly stepped up the arena. "Senior brother Zhou, can I give this a try?" A girl's voice, which had a slight hint of laughter, reverberated on the arena. Everyone's eyes were instantly fixed on the tiny figure on the arena. Zhou Chu paused in his tracks. Turning around, he saw a skinny, beautiful girl walking up the arena and was stunned. "How do I address you, junior sister?" Zhou Chu asked carefully. The new disciples had already clearly seen his scheme. How could there be such a foolish person to come knocking on his door? "I am Yi Qingtang," Yi Qingtang said with a smile. The caution in Zhou Chu's eyes vanished into thin air once Yi Qingtang said her name, and a scornful expression instantly appeared in his eyes. There was already a rumor that a girl with a red spirit root was selected amongst this batch of new disciples. This was a casual joke amongst them, and Zhou Chu would never have thought that the last to go up the arena would actually be the girl with an inferior red spirit root. He had seen people who courted death, but he had never seen someone who really wanted to court death. Those new disciples with yellow spirit roots were not even his opponent, yet this girl still wanted to challenge him? When Lu Xiuwen, who was already ready to leave, saw Yi Qingtang going up the stage, he returned immediately and looked at her as though he was ready to watch a good show. Those new disciples were taken aback for a moment as well, because of Yi Qingtang's appearance. Everyone felt that Yi Qingtang was definitely crazy. Otherwise, how would a girl with such a small red spirit root dare to enter the arena? Chapter 135. "Oh? Does junior sister Yi wants to give it a try? How do you want to compete?" Zhou Chu would naturally not let go of such a fat sheep. There was already no one going up the arena, and Yi Qingtang was the last person that he could trick. Of course, he had to properly greet her. Yi Qingtang calmly looked at the greed in Zhou Chu's eyes, and her lips curled up. "Just now, senior brother Zhou said that I would win a bottle of she spirit pills, as long as I receive 3 moves. I think this bet seems pretty little. How about we bet on 4 bottles? Yi Qingtang said with a smile. Once her words were said, everyone around here was instantly dumbfounded. Is Yi Qingtang crazy? She actually wants to bet on 4 bottles of she spirit pills with senior brother Zhou? Where would she get 4 bottles from? Those new disciples who went up the arena previously were extremely shocked when they saw Yi Qingtang's crazy act, and only felt that Yi Qingtang had nothing better to do and was sending herself to death's door. However, there were also some bad-meaning disciples who lost their she spirit pills, who hoped that someone would be worse than them since they lost a bottle of she spirit pill, and were going to fall behind others in their cultivation. It so happened that Yi Qingtang's suggestion fulfilled their requirements. Similarly, Zhou Chu did not expect that the fat sheep that foolishly delivered herself to him would be so self-aware. He initially thought that he would end things by cheating 1 bottle. Who would have thought? Yi Qingtang actually came over to increase the bet, and this really made him happy. Junior sister Yi, don't say I'm bullying you. I can agree to your request, but I want to ask something. You, a new disciple, just entered the sect and received 2 bottles of she spirit pills in total. If you want to compete with me, You should show some sincerity, right? Yi Qingtang chuckled, and immediately took out 4 bottles of she spirit pills from her arms. Once he saw those 4 bottles, Zhou Chu's eyes almost popped out. This girl really had 4 bottles. From a side, Yun Shu did not know whether to laugh or cry at Yi Qingtang's crazy act. Amongst the 4 bottles of she spirit pills in her hands, 2 of them were his. When Yi Qingtang asked him for his she spirit pills just now, Yun Shu was still a little hesitant. However, when he saw the girl's sincere look, Yun Shu could not bear to reject her. He already mentally prepared himself and treated it as going crazy with Yi Qingtang for once. So be it if she lost them all. While she spirit pills were precious, Yun Shu had a peaceful nature and was not too concerned. Everyone was quite surprised that Yi Qingtang could obtain 4 bottles of she spirit pills, and were all curious where she got 2 additional bottles from. Only Lu Xiaowen frowned slightly as his gaze landed on Yun Shu, who was smiling bitterly from a side. Seeing Yun Shu's behavior, Lu Xiaowen already knew the background of the other 2 bottles, and could not help but scoff in his heart. To think that he still thought of Yun Shu as his only competitor in the batch. Who would have thought that Yun Shu would be this foolish to give his she spirit pills to Yi Qingtang to play around with? Yet coming to think of it, Lu Xiaowen was satisfied. His abilities were comparable to Yun Shu's. If he could pull a gap between them the moment he entered the sect, it would naturally be the best. He had the confidence that he could leave Yun Shu behind with the advantage of these 2 bottles of she spirit pills. No one at the scene felt that Yi Qingtang was able to win. The new disciples were watching the good show, while the old disciples quietly sighed. Lin Long walked past the arena, and while she did not intend to pay attention to it initially, she stopped in her tracks when she saw the tiny frame in the corner of her eyes. Chapter 136. It's her? Lin Longs looked over the arena, and an unhappy expression emerged in her eyes when she saw Zhou Chu. She had heard some things about this arena as well, but she did not expect that Yi Qingtang, who appeared very calm, would actually look for trouble like others. Instinctively, she stood aside and watched on quietly. After confirming that Yi Qingtang had 4 bottles of she spirit pills, Zhou Chu almost struck immediately without warming up. The 4 additional bottles now would cover the quota given to them in 2 months. Sure, since junior sister Yi is so sincere, I will accept it as your senior brother. After 3 moves, my 4 bottles of she spirit pills will be all yours if you can receive my moves, Zhou Chu said as he purposely feigned generosity and placed 4 bottles of she spirit pills aside. However, he was very clear that Yi Qingtang definitely did not have the ability to take away these 4 bottles, and would have to give him 4 bottles instead. He was not afraid of Yi Qingtang going back on her words. Anyone in the arena in the sect must follow rules, and if anyone went back on their words, they would be punished once the news traveled into the warden's ears. Please take care of me, senior brother. Yi Qingtang cupped one hand in another, and she lowered her eyes as a sly look flashed across in her eyes. Zhou Chu nodded aloofly and focused on his breathing. This time, he did not intend to play the same trick and go easy on the first 2 moves. Anyway, no one would go up the arena after Yi Qingtang, and he obviously wanted to finish her as quickly as possible. Below the arena, an ominous feeling rose up within Yun Shu as he looked at Zhou Chu directing his energy. The method Zhou Chu used to direct his energy was extremely similar to the one he used in the 3rd method previously. Could it be that he wanted to finish Yi Qingtang in the first move? Yun Shu could not help but frown. Brother Yun, I'm afraid you'll be in deep waters because of Yi Qingtang. Lu Xiaowen's voice rang beside Yun Shu's ears. Yun Shu looked over and saw that Lu Xiaowen actually came to his side since some time ago. Yi Qingtang has another 2 bottles of she spirit pills in her hands. Those should be yours, right? I know that Brother Yun is kind by nature, but there are some things that shouldn't be compromised so easily like this. You should have seen the outcome of all the other junior and senior brothers previously. How would Yi Qingtang be able to withstand 3 moves from senior brother Zhou? Yun Shu merely looked at him coldly without saying anything. Lu Xiaowen was not too bothered. He merely wanted to watch the two of them embarrass themselves in front of him. On the arena, Zhou Chu had already gathered his force in his fists. With a sudden loud roar and a quick jump, he dashed for Yi Qingtang directly. Yi Qingtang remained rooted to the ground calmly, as though she did not see Zhou Chu's incoming powerful punch. Everyone below the arena was already trembling in fear at the sight. Seeing how Yi Qingtang stood still without any intention to receive the move, they thought that Yi Qingtang was really seeking death, and would be knocked out by Zhou Chu without even withstanding one move. However, just when Zhou Chu's punch was about to land on Yi Qingtang's face, Yi Qingtang suddenly bent down. The timing when she bent down was too ingenious. When Zhou Chu threw an extremely powerful punch, her small movement caused Zhou Chu to end up punching the air without warning. Zhou Chu was indeed a little dumbfounded when he punched the air. He clearly saw Yi Qingtang remaining still as though she was too stunned to move. How was it that this girl suddenly bent down and avoided his punch the moment he attacked? Chapter 137. Zhou Chu turned to look at Yi Qingtang and saw that she actually picked up a light, square handkerchief from the ground. I didn't notice that this handkerchief fell on the ground just now, Yi Qingtang said as she picked up the handkerchief and straightened herself smilingly. In that moment, everyone was muddled. The moment Zhou Chu threw out a punch, everyone knew that this sparring was over. Yi Qingtang was too slow-witted to receive his move. However, no one expected that at that critical moment, Yi Qingtang actually bent down and avoided the attack miraculously. And what made people more speechless was, she bent down only to pick the handkerchief on the ground. Her luck was a little too good. Everyone felt speechless instantly, and the tense strings in their hearts were suddenly loosened. Zhou Chu's imposing punch was dodged by Yi Qingtang so casually, and Zhou Chu's face turned blue in a moment as well. If Yi Qingtang did not have just a tiny red spirit root, Zhou Chu would have thought that she was purposely fooling around with him. Oh, senior brother Zhou already threw out a move? I didn't notice. Yi Qingtang held the handkerchief and looked at Zhou Chu a little shockingly, as though she just realized that Zhou Chu had already attacked. The corner of Zhou Chu's lips twitched, and he wished he could kill this girl who had it easy, but was still acting innocent. There are still 2 moves then? Yi Qingtang asked with a smile. There are still 2 moves indeed. Junior sister Yi should be more focused this time, Zhou Chu said while suppressing his grievance. Please go ahead, senior brother Zhou. Yi Qingtang smiled as she kept the small handkerchief. Zhou Chu did not rest for a moment and launched an attack at Yi Qingtang immediately. There was a slight change in expression in Yi Qingtang's eyes. At the moment when Zhou Chu attacked, Yi Qingtang used some mysterious footstep and spun on her heels, turning around. Just by raising her tiny wrist, she directly met with Zhou Chu's fist, which seemed like a careless graze, but dispersed the force in Zhou Chu's fist invisibly. Yi Qingtang turned her palm over and pushed Zhou Chu, forcing him to fall forward again in the direction of the force of his punch. To others, this scene appeared as Yi Qingtang shifting her body in a panic. Moreover, the position where she raised her hand to block the move was incorrect as well. But it was just these 2 movements that made Zhou Chu punch the air once again. He stumbled forward a few steps due to the force from his punch, and almost fell. After barely regaining his balance, Zhou Chu was utterly confused. What happened? How did his punch suddenly become so weak and soft? Zhou Chu originally suspected whether Yi Qingtang played any tricks, but their interaction just now was only for a moment, and Yi Qingtang only raised his fist with her wrist without using any force. But what happened to him? The next move that he had already prepared could not be carried out due to the sudden and violent stumble. It so happened that Yi Qingtang weirdly dodged this second move. 2 successive failed moves caused Zhou Chu's expression to turn ugly. Other disciples did not react much, and merely felt that Yi Qingtang was pretty lucky. Furthermore, Zhou Chu did not beat any other new disciples within 2 moves, though this point was overlooked by everyone. They only felt that Zhou Chu was purposely going easy. Only people as skilled as Yun Shu and Lu Xiuan could tell that both of Zhou Chu's moves were intended to end the competition immediately. It was just that Yi Qingtang's receiving act was too strange, and one really could not tell whether it was because her luck was good or that Zhou Chu went easy on her. Chapter 138. The smile on Lu Ziyuan's face could not help but fall a little. Wanting to sense whether Yi Qingtang played any tricks, he narrowed his eyes, but he did not feel that there were any special moves after thinking over and over again. 2 out of 3 moves were over. Only 1 move was left, and then Yi Qingtang would win. This time, Zhou Chu did not dare to be careless as well. God knows why this annoying girl was so cursed. She obviously looked very weak. How could he not manage to hit her? Zhou Chu took a deep breath, refusing to believe in superstitions, and the eyes which he looked at Yi Qingtang with became increasingly stern. A seeming smile was still hung on Yi Qingtang's face. There's still 1 move left. Go ahead, senior brother Zhou, Yi Qingtang said with a smile. Zhou Chu scoffed. He suddenly walked forward and directed his energy, directly hitting Yi Qingtang without giving her any reaction time. A stern look flashed across her smiling eyes. At the moment when Zhou Chu dashed towards her, her hind foot backstepped a little, and she flipped her wrist. When Zhou Chu's punch was about to land, her hands suddenly held onto his fists, and using the impact of his punch, she threw him out directly. To others, all of this seemed like Zhou Chu slipped and was flung forward because his force was too violent. Zhou Chu put all his force into this punch, and if the punch had landed on Yi Qingtang, her bones would definitely be crushed. However, as Yi Qingtang flipped her wrist and dissolved the force, she directly transferred the energy onto Zhou Chu and sent him flying away. A large bang was heard. Zhou Chu was thrown onto the side of the arena with a heavy thud. The pain made his face pale and contorted in agony. The surrounding disciples were all dumbfounded. To them, the battle between Zhou Chu and Yi Qingtang simply looked like a joke. Yi Qingtang wanted to block Zhou Chu's attack, but unexpectedly, Zhou Chu did not stand stable himself and actually flew out. What the hell is this? Those new disciples that lost to Zhou Chu previously almost spat a mouthful of blood. Why did Zhou Chu not make so many mistakes when sparring with them? Why was there a series of problems when it became Yi Qingtang? Even if you thought that the little girl was good-looking, you should not be so obvious when going easy on her. Those who still hoped for Yi Qingtang to end up worse than them were all disappointed. Zhou Chu stood up unsteadily and held onto his painful chest as a buzzing sound rang in his head. Senior brother Zhou, you're too kind. I'll accept these 4 bottles of She Spirit pills. Yi Qingtang beamed at the rather shabby-looking Zhou Chu. Before Zhou Chu managed to say something, she went straight to take the 4 bottles of She Spirit pills that Zhou Chu had placed into her hands and kept it as though it was the logical thing to do. Zhou Chu watched with his own eyes as the 4 bottles of She Spirit pills that he won previously was kept by Yi Qingtang. Instantly, his face turned extremely ugly, and he was so depressed he almost threw up blood. He had not managed to react to what happened previously. He only felt that after Yi Qingtang's touch, there seemed to be a force deviating the original track of his fist, and he ended up throwing himself out. No one had expected that Yi Qingtang could actually receive Zhou Chu's 3 moves. Accurately speaking, Yi Qingtang did not even put in any effort. It was Zhou Chu who made successive mistakes, which looked like he was intentionally going easy on her. No one knew that Zhou Chu was the one who was pissed to death. Chapter 139. Zhou Chu took out the 4 bottles of She Spirit pills which he did not even plan to give Yi Qingtang. Yet unexpectedly, he lost the bait along with the fish. Under everyone's watch, he could only concede. Not bad, junior sister Yi, Zhou Chu said as his lips twitched, and his face darkened to a shocking shade. In the outer sect, there were quite a few disciples who entered after Zhou Chu, and once suffered a loss on this arena. Seeing as to how Zhou Chu lost 4 bottles of She Spirit pills at one go, They were very satisfied as well. Simply not wanting to remain there any longer, Zhou Chu turned around and left with a dark face. Yi Qingtang looked at the 4 bottles of she spirit pills that she gained, and her lips curled up. She walked down the arena and to Yin Shu's side, stuffing the 4 bottles that she won from Zhou Chu into Yin Shu's hands. "What are you doing, junior sister?" Yin Shu asked, confused. He had not recovered from the shock of Yi Qingtang's victory, and could not help but be a little muddle-headed when he saw 4 bottles of elixirs being stuffed into his hands in the blink of an eye. "I borrowed your 2 bottles of elixirs to go up the arena. Now that I've won, I'm just returning them to you with interest," Yi Qingtang beamed. This action fell into many eyes. Previously, quite a number of people were still curious where Yi Qingtang got 2 additional bottles of she spirit pills from, and they finally understood now. "No, I didn't go up the arena, and it's natural for you to keep this elixir yourself. I'll just take back my 2 original bottles." Yin Shu returned to his senses and was unwilling to gain such benefits without putting any effort. Moreover, he knew that Yi Qingtang's spirit root was not considered good and needed the she spirit pills more than him. Thus, he was unwilling to share a portion of her winnings. "If senior brother Yin doesn't accept, then I'll not find you for help in the future," Yi Qingtang purposely replied in a perplexed tone. Yin Shu opened his mouth and looked at Yi Qingtang's wronged expression, not knowing what to do, and could only forcefully accept it. "Thank you then, junior sister." In Lu Xiaowen's eyes, the interaction between Yin Shu and Yi Qingtang was extremely glaring. Initially, Lu Xiaowen was still mocking Yin Shu for giving Yi Qingtang his elixirs, as it would allow him to establish a greater gap between him and Yin Shu within a month. Lu Xiaowen obtained an additional bottle from Zhou Chu, and had 3 bottles of she spirit pills in total, while Yin Shu would have none. Yet unexpectedly, not only were the 2 bottles of she spirit pills that Yin Shu gave out returned to him, he even got 2 additional bottles from Yi Qingtang. In the end, it was Lu Xiaowen who had 1 less bottle than Yin Shu instead. All his previous calculations fell out, and Lu Xiaowen almost choked to death. The sarcasm on his face vanished into thin air immediately, and his expression was even darker than Zhou Chu, who left hurriedly. Without saying anything, he turned around and left, unwilling to spare both Yi Qingtang and Yin Shu another look. Yi Qingtang is indeed smart. Yin Shu seems to be the young master of Lu Yin family clan, and this act cozied up to him. She is really scheming. Most people were more or less unhappy as they saw that Yi Qingtang and Yin Shu gained 2 additional bottles of she spirit pills without doing anything. To them, it was obviously best to use the she spirit pills for themselves. However, Yin Shu's family background was outstanding, and was indeed a person that one would want to win over. Thus, they had already conjectured the motive of Yi Qingtang's act. Yi Qingtang was not at all bothered by this. What had her kindness to a person got anything to do with their identity or background? It was simply her liking only. After observing from aside all along, and witnessing the outcome of the competition, Lin Long showed a worried expression, though she silently left without saying anything. Chapter 140. She spirit pill was a good item, and obviously the more of it the better. However, Yi Qingtang would never maltreat those who had helped her in her previous life. Only she, who had experienced hell before, would understand vividly how precious the kindness of a timely assistance was. The sword faction was the main faction in the outer sect, and the outer sect warden was to teach Xianling sect's basic sword plays. After the warden taught the lessons, the disciples were to cultivate themselves, and the extent of improvement was all dependent on their own talent and diligence. In her previous life, Yi Qingtang stayed in the outer sect for many years. Thus, she was already extremely familiar with the content of the lessons, as if they were on the back of her hand. She was very clear that although the things taught in the outer sect were profound when compared to places outside sects, the real elite skills were concentrated in the inner sect. And only by entering the inner sect would one be able to reach higher attainment and cultivate more powerful skills. After experiencing everything in her past life, Yi Qingtang would not be negligent. The moment she finished listening to the lesson, she immediately headed for the training hall to practice her swordplay. Her current body was in a far better condition than the one in her previous life, where she had to go through countless hardships and tribulations. Given her current condition, it was impossible for her to use the many cultivation techniques that she learned in her previous life. Moreover, she did not have a spirit root in the previous life, and was utterly helpless at cultivations that used the spirit root. It could be said that she was completely a stranger to this aspect. Thus, she had to cultivate even more diligently in this lifetime. However, after a few days of cultivation, Yi Qingtang did not plod on forcefully as well. To become powerful in this sect, one could not rely only on the lessons, but had to personally fight for it. This method was to use the Xianming points. Xianming points could be exchanged for things to upgrade oneself like elixirs, martial technique scrolls, and usage of popular cultivation spots. Additionally, there was only one way of obtaining the points. That was by doing missions. The sect would appoint respective disciples at certain times to complete sect-appointed missions. After completing the mission, one would obtain the respective Xianming points. However, disciples who had just entered the sect for less than a month like Yi Qingtang would not be appointed to complete missions. Yi Qingtang really needed Xianming points, as she knew how important it was to upgrade herself. Hence, her goal was locked down. You want to go to the rewards pavilion? Yun Shu was a little stunned when he heard of Yi Qingtang's plan. The rewards pavilion would distribute some missions which were not forced on the disciples, but completely based on the disciples' wish. If they wanted to earn Xianming points, they could accept the missions where there would be no punishment should they fail, and they were able to gain Xianming points should they succeed. According to the differing levels of difficulty, the reward of Xianming points varied. Simple missions would have lesser rewards, and one person could complete it independently, while higher difficulty missions would require disciples to form a group by themselves and complete it through teamwork. Previously, the outer sect elder had mentioned this, but no one took it to heart. The new disciples were still busy familiarizing themselves with everything in the outer sect then, and did not have the energy to struggle with missions. Is it because you do not have enough Shi spirit pills already? I still have some with me, how about you take it first? Yun Shu did not completely approve of Yi Qingtang's strategy. These few days, he could tell that Yi Qingtang was more hardworking than any other disciple, and felt her desire to become powerful. However, Yi Qingtang shook her head with a smile. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.